Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 17th Select Board meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:00 p.m. and ask that you stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is anybody in the audience for public comment? Please come up and identify yourself and let us know your address.
2 Prospect Street. What I'd like to know is, I'd like some straight answers. These 2 stop signs at the senior center in the one-way, the right-hand turn only sign, the stop signs are absolutely essential. Well, why isn't it coming before this board? Or are people afraid to bring it before your board?
I don't know that people are afraid. I think some of us were asking, is it necessary and how would it be arranged?
Well,
Because I myself,
It's nothing,
It's a good move not taking it, because you're gonna piss off a lot of seniors, really. I mean,
well, it's not for, it's comment, not discussion, so we will.
Okay, so what it is, I watch that traffic all the time. The idea of them not going left there is because of that street, that what they want to do. They don't want traffic on their street. What's happening is that they've made it worse, because people are going to go out of their way to use their street now. And that's the only way to fight back. My concern is, I've been up there and I've watched the traffic come off 125, the airport, in all those areas, and somebody's going to get seriously hurt. I mean, it's if you drive careful, it's fine, but you got to understand seniors. I'm a senior, okay? I'm a younger senior, but I played cards at the senior center for like a year now, and I be leaving the senior center, and they're going 5 miles an hour, and they can't get out into the road. Somebody's going to make the wrong move. And that's the concern about putting people on Sutton Street, you know. Other than that, it's doing fine, but I can't envision police officers giving their grandparents tickets for getting home safe. You know, I really can't. But I mean, I can say I'm glad you didn't have to handle it, because then you'd be labeled with it. But I don't know who put the sign up. I know in another case who put the sign up, and it wasn't very nice. Almost got me killed. That's for another story. But I'll be in next week. I got a nice one for you next week.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What, are you talking, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Are you talking about stop signs that are up?
No, the right-hand turn only, which keeps them from going out. It forces them to go to Sutton Street. And it is awful busy there.
Okay, so that sign is up.
That sign is up. I mean, the stop signs are necessary for there, but somebody got their way and got that sign up, and the people on that street did that, because they don't want the traffic. But like I said, it's backfiring, because the seniors are thinking, now, how can we hit that street twice in one day? I mean, it's very tough, you know, and I just hope nobody gets hurt there, because it's a very, very dangerous area, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
thank you, Tom.
Yep. See, we have more public comment? Yes. Hello.
Hi there, Ryan Sharender, 60 Phillips Court. As full disclosure, I am a member of the Old Center Historical District Commission. I am not here on behalf of them. I'm here as a citizen today, though. So my question to you as a board is, why did we not renew Harry Aznarian's term as chair for the commission?
Okay, this is not.
So I was told via
Opportunity
email
for
to come here to ask,
discussion,
I was told via email to come here by Lori to ask this question, so that's why I'm here to do it. So I would respectfully ask for an answer to that.
It's not on our agenda, so we can't have the discussion, but I could talk to you outside of.
So I was told again, it has to be in an open meeting setting, that I cannot ask this question unless it's open meeting. So how am I supposed to do that if this is the open meeting setting that I'm supposed to ask this question in, and I can't get an answer for
Well,
it?
you could ask to have it put on at our
An
next meeting,
agenda.
and that's next week.
I gave the email to Lori to put this on the agenda.
When?
After admittedly, after the agenda came out for this meeting.
Oh, so we can put it, you can make a request to have it on the agenda for the next meeting.
All right, that's it. I would also ask too then for that, when was it discussed publicly that he was not going to be renewed for that purpose? Because I cannot find any meeting minutes anywhere that he was publicly discussed that they weren't going to renew him. So I would respectfully ask for that to be there as well. And I just, as a point, Harry has 30 years on that commission. His knowledge is unbelievable for what he has done for this town for the 30 years. And he got a 2-sentence email from this board saying, thank you for your service, but you're no longer needed. That is incredibly disrespectful of this board to somebody that's given 30 years of service to this town to send a 2-sentence email saying, thank you for your service. He doesn't even know why he wasn't renewed. Nobody talked to him. That is not okay. That's not how we do business in this town. This town respects their residents. They respect people that do business for 30 years. We are losing somebody on that commission that has incredible knowledge. And it makes me extremely upset that this commission never once came to us, or this board never once came to us to talk to us about it. None of the people on that commission knew this was coming. People in the Old Center Historical District had no idea that that was coming. This board made a mistake, and you owe Harry an apology. Whether you put him back on that commission or not, you owe him an apology, and better than a 2-sentence email to him. And I would ask that you do that for him. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we're going to move on to governmental reports. We're starting with an update from the Commission on Ability Assistance.
Good evening. Let me start out by saying I'm sorry, but you're going to be stuck with me for another year. Nobody wants my job. So first off, I'd like to also thank you. I noticed about a week or two ago that the crosswalk we requested at the intersection of Main and Green to connect what was now the new sidewalk going down Mass Ave has been painted. So thank you very much for listening to our requests from last year. It's greatly appreciated. We have, thanks to your support, a very diverse committee that has become very active again. Thank you for your help in getting us those new members. We've got, with me, I've got a child with multiple health diagnoses. I myself have epilepsy. One of our commission members, her sister has multiple mental health diagnoses, and she's her sister's official guardian. Excuse me, and she's worked entirely with the adult mental health population at the senior administrative level her entire life. We've got one member whose parent has personal physical limitations, and he's heavily involved in the real estate market. Another member with multiple general concerns regarding the population, and he also works in the real estate market. So we've got now 4 people who come to this commission with very unique perspectives that I think are going to serve this town well going into the next year. Ability assistance. I am proud to say by the time we are done with our 2023-2024 season this time next year, because we have pulled those dates, believe it or not, we will have taped 44 episodes. In fact, today happens to be the anniversary of the very first episode we taped back in 2018 when Joyce Bradshaw came on to talk about the town clerk's office. So it's kind of an ironic day. In the past year, we've brought on Ironstone Farms, Bridgewell, American Training, the Disability Law Center. Senator Tarr has come on to talk about his administrative agenda for those who are under the disability umbrella on Beacon Hill this session. The Federation for Children with Special Needs, Women's Money Matters, Representative Trom Wim talking about the same thing in terms of her agenda, and Minnie Meva explaining to everybody about the new little vans you can see around for the local transit. And when we start back up again in October, we're going to be having on Maternal Mental Health Leadership Alliance, Essex County District Attorney Paul Tucker, Waystone Farms, the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and we have dates. We're just trying to secure them. We have people who want to come on from the Letterman Foundation, the Mass Save Program, Dogs for Better Lives, the Doug Flutie Foundation, and State Representative Adrian Ramos, State Senator Barry Feingold, State Auditor Diana DeZoglio. And we'd actually like to have you folks on the show at one point or another to talk about your role and what you guys do here at the town. We've had the town manager, we've had the police department, but we haven't had you guys. And I think you guys need to be on. We also want to restructure the commission a little bit. And I had sent Melissa, and of course, my system's not working. I had sent Melissa a list of breaking up the different committees and commissions that report to you. Because one of the things that I've noticed in my time as chair of the commission is how much each different area of the world gets affected by somebody or something with a disability, but you don't know it's needed there until it's actually needed. And we'd like to be a resource for you, for the town, as part of what you've charged us with, to have more of a direct relationship with these different committees and commissions, as I've outlined in the handout. Did Melissa provide?
I got it.
Okay. As outlined by that, the commission sat down, we put a lot of hard work and thought into what I sent to you regarding that, to try to bring a stronger relationship between what we do for you and what you ask other commissions to do, so that we can be a resource for them as well. We have also started working closer with our legislative delegation to find out from them when they know of bills that would be of use to the population that we provide a voice to for you here in town, to, as we learn about these bills, maybe sending them along to you, so that you, with some information, so that if you choose to, you can write a letter from the town to the state representatives and the state senators, either supporting or not supporting, based upon whatever the bill happens to be. We're also closely following up better with building variance issues that are being sent over to me, because God knows, as an attorney, I have no clue how to read that, but I now have two people on the commission who have real estate backgrounds, and they're going to be able to do that a little bit better. We have another long-term project that we'd like to put in front of you for you to consider, where we've now been able to show you what we can do with the Ability Assistance Program. We'd like to bring something similar to what used to be called the Abilities Expo in Boston here locally. It'll take a significant amount of planning. It would need space that would be handicapped accessible inside, so putting it out on the common would not be sufficient. And we'd like to invite in third-party nonprofits, or even for-profit companies that offer services, hardware, durable hardware that would be utilized by the population. Because one of the things we've also learned by doing the show is that there are so many resources out there that people don't know about until we've aired it. But we only limit ourselves to nonprofits and government agencies because we're not here to advertise for ABC Electric Wheelchair Corporation. We're here to help in other ways. So what we'd like to do is start talking about and possibly putting plans together for maybe this time next year, if possible. Where could we put something like that together? What would it cost? You know, would we have to ask for you to put something into the budget when the next budget comes around? Police to be there for, you know, or fire to be there, you know, for just personnel safety types of issues. What type of businesses you'd like to see us bring in, so that we can be a place where not only our residents here in North Andover, but in the area, all around, we can be more of a voice of what North Andover stands for showing that we stand for those who are considered disabled. We're still getting positive feedback from other commissions similar to ours and other towns. They're watching our program. Thanks to North Andover CAM, this program literally has nationwide reach. But we've got Andover consistently calling me up saying, can I post that on our link? Go for it. So the North Andover is putting it out there that we really have a desire to be that leader. And I think that this, if we can put it together as the next step and maybe make it something that could be done annually or biannually, we could show them we really care about our population, no matter what stage of life they're at and what level of disability they might have, whether it be as something that you can see or something like mental illness that you don't know is there unless somebody tells you. Like, for example, how many of you knew I have epilepsy? That's basically everything I've got in a nutshell in terms of what we've done in the past year. Questions? Comments?
Just a comment. Phyllis, thank you for all you've done. I mean, you've really taken this commission over the last few years from a little-known group to really a star and really a true advocate for these really, really important topics. And
Thank you.
just the list of people that you said that have appeared on your show. And, I remember when the show first started, we had a little bumpy starts there, but I mean, now it's just cruising right along. So thank you so much. I mean, you've done
I
a
remember-
tremendous job.
I remember going out to coffee with you going, please, let's try this. And you're like, oh, I'll give you 4 or 5 episodes. Well, we're going to be talking about 50 episodes sooner than not.
And you proved me wrong that way. So thank you.
Exactly.
So great job.
Thank
Just
you.
Everything you've done.
You are a great spokesperson for the people that you're helping.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And
Thank
we
you.
appreciate those efforts. And I love the eye with which you look at everything, right? Like, so you don't hesitate to reach out and say, hey, this isn't quite right. So it's really helpful to everybody in the community.
Well, that's
to
what you
have
tasked us to do.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Phyllis, for all your work, for your advocacy, for bringing things to our attention that maybe we missed, so thank you.
thank you.
And thank you. Your enthusiasm shows through in all of it, so really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thank
as
you.
well.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item A of new business. And we need to open, I'll take a motion to open the public hearing.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we open the public hearing for a joint poll petition for Mass Electric Company, DBA National Grid, and Verizon New England to locate a pole on Stevens Street.
Okay,
Second?
so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are in public hearing.
Hi, good
Hi.
evening. Dave Boucher, National Grid, 1101 Turnpike Street, right here in North Andover. We were approached by AT&T to add their lines to our utility poles on Stevens Street. And in the diagram we provided, between poles 669 and 670, they want to run their line. 670 is kind of a smaller pole, so what we want to do, we could replace it in the same spot with a 40-foot pole instead of a 35, which is what we need when we're adding wires. That, along with moving the pole, which is really what I'm here for, is the petition is to move the pole approximately 40 feet. As I said, it's 180 feet between the poles right now. We like 150 or less. If we move it 40, as we're asking, it'll bring it down to 140, and that would enable us to run the lines from pole to pole and not have sag coming low towards the ground. It keeps it off the ground. And there's an actually added benefit here with this that has nothing to do with AT&T. We have an aerial line, a service drop that goes to 475 Stevens Street, and it crosses the neighbor's property. What this will enable us to do is to finally get that off of, it just barely clips the little edge of the property. Where the new pole is going to land, we'll be able to service to 475 Stevens Street, and therefore take away the aerial trespass. As I said, it's nothing that, if you're not looking for it, you wouldn't see it. I see it because I know what to look for. It's kind of just clips up like the last 5 or 10 feet of the property. It goes over the neighboring property, and we're not supposed to do that. But it was done years ago, possibly before that it was built or something. The home was built, or maybe it was one property at one time, who knows? But long story short, if you pass it tonight, it'll enable us to move the pole 40 feet and go forward and provide service on the utility poles for AT&T to jump on with their communications.
Any questions from the board? I think we,
Has
So
been
just to
ma-
be clear, the pole that's currently in front of 477 Stevens Street is going to be removed, and then a new pole will be moved 40 feet down the street, I don't know what direction, is south, I guess.
Yeah,
And that will have, those spans will run,
right. Actually, the pole 670 is not in front of 477. It will now be in front of 477. And 477 is the house that, it's not the house that's being trespassed. I had to, if you look on the
477
drawing.
and 475 is the same house, right, it's a duplex.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. It's 475, 477, yeah. So the old pole is actually in front of the neighboring property, 479, if you see there. It's not exactly to scale on the drawing, but it's in red. It's a red,
It's black and white.
It's black and white, I'm sorry. It's a smaller one. It's the smaller 670. The larger 670, which is kind of a little bit larger and
So the
has
pole
the
that's
angle on
in
it.
front of 477 right now is not going to be removed and replaced.
That's correct. That's the new position. And it says 4 tri with a line going to it. Do you see that?
Well, it's not new, there's already a pole there, so I'm confused.
No, the existing
Yeah.
pole.
Well, the owner of 477 is sitting right behind you, so
Oh,
he might
okay.
be able to clarify.
The pole is centered directly in front of my house, pole number 670.
Okay.
So now if you move it 40 feet north, what it showed would go in between my house and my neighbor's house.
The neighbor's, yep.
Which is a dead spot in the fence.
Bill, you need to come to the
Okay.
microphone.
Yeah.
Are we okay with that?
yeah, it's public
You
hearing.
need
Hi,
to
how are you?
identify yourself.
I'm William Holt, and I live at 477, and I own also 475 Stevens Street.
And talk through me, you know.
Okay, I'm sorry. So pole 670 is directly in front of the center of my house. And what I proposed was to have it moved roughly 40 feet down the street in between mine and my neighbor's property to take it away from the front of my house, so that way AT&T could put their cell tower there and not be directly in front of my house, looking like a commercial area.
So my question for him
Yep.
is,
My-
does this placement put that pole where we had talked about in the middle of that fence and right in between the properties?
Yes, yeah,
That's-
it goes to like
So-
a parking
That's all
lot.
that work.
Garage.
Right, so,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Sorry,
plans that came in the mail are like, a little kid must have drew them up because they're terrible.
Yeah.
I couldn't even read them,
understand.
but,
I draw them differently.
all right, so pole 670 is
So-
directly in the
It's
center of my
from a
house.
contractor. They contracted to this, so.
So 670 is going away.
So is number 670 in front of
No.
475,
Oh,
470
there's
going to be
two.
removed?
The big one.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and then it's going to be
Number
moved.
one.
This one's gonna stay, the big,
The one that's higher, yes.
and this little one
The
is
little
gonna
one's
go,
going away.
and this spot is on the fence between those
Exactly.
two.
Yep.
That's, because it
So-
took a lot of work for us to get to that.
Right, so I just went and measured it again before I came
Yeah.
here, and 40 feet brings it down to right where the edge of his driveway comes out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
so,
that's exactly 40
They'll
feet.
place it right at the
Okay.
property line.
Well, no, I don't want it the property
Oh, you
line.
just- you
The
want it
property line is
further?
only about 35 feet, and I do not want it the property line because I will not be able to get a tenant to come into my driveway.
okay, you have to.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yep, yep.
You did talk
So that
about
was the whole thing was,
That was 40.
if this wanted to go through, that it needed to be put into at least the center of that fence line, which is dead space.
Right.
There's about 8 feet of fence there, so it needs to be moved in between the two, and then it won't block anybody coming in and out
Okay.
either place.
Thank you, we'll
Okay.
clarify before.
Yeah, just another note, just, I'll follow up and have the engineer contact you.
Okay.
Make sure we get it in the exact spot that it's supposed to go in. It's not, it wasn't marked there today when I was there.
So,
So I mean, if they're
Gives
saying
me a
40
little-
feet, I don't want to see 37 feet.
Right.
You're saying 40 feet, so I know where 40 feet's going to land.
Plans
Okay.
call for 40
the
feet.
Okay.
plans go.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
could get your chalk out and mark it. Say, this is
I have paint, I'll paint it.
Well, we gotta get out there and put a stake in before we call the dig safe in, so.
Gives me
anyway.
like a little pause because there is a little bit of confusion, but if you can verify for us that it is in fact the space that he is
Yes.
referring to, that is in the spot between, okay.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, the plans are very confusing. The plans kind of show 40 feet between the new pole and the pole beyond 670. So if you look at the plans,
Right.
it doesn't really, it's not clear. So
Oh, you're right, it's showing it going down to 2013, isn't it?
It looks like the new span will be 40 feet rather than,
Right, no, we want 40
Yeah.
feet between 670 and
I'll
to
have
the
to,
north, between, I'm sorry, 469 Stevens Street.
I don't want to talk bad about a person, but I would not have done that way. I would have had it clear to you.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, why it's confusing.
Excuse me. I have a picture right here of my house and my street and my pole. Could I show it?
Can you
Yeah, we need,
So-
Show it to you
us, yeah.
first? Okay.
I think we've seen it, but
I
we'll
think
look at it
we
again.
have it.
Oh, it's
This is
new.
on Google Map, so I
Oh.
just pulled up my house.
yeah, we were just looking
Oh,
at
you
it.
were,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
yeah. So I think if I, and again, for
If you
the-
can show it, but it shows the, or Google Earth. Yeah, that's.
that is moving to here.
That's, yes, so it should be like in between, right where you have that arrow. If he can say that, then I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
that-
I think you'd want to show it on the plans, but
So when
yeah.
we agree to this.
But if you look to the left,
It
you'll see
is-
where the pole actually is in front of my house, right in the center of the mulch.
Yeah, that's where it is now, yep.
That's 670.
And
And if
that-
you, it needs to be moved, not where it's painted black and tan, that's right on my property line, it needs to be moved.
On the other side of the driveway?
Yeah, so they have 40 feet,
Right
it's
there.
gonna come like somewhere right
Right
there.
around there.
Okay, so this discussion has been, it is noted, so, in the
Okay.
record, so we should be good to
Okay.
go.
We should probably get a corrected plan for the record, I would think, right?
Is it incorrect or is it just unclear?
Well, it's,
Correct, right?
well, with
If I'm looking
the,
at this, what I'm showing you, if you're agreeing with it, then that's correct.
well, but
that piece of paper
this
that
plan
was
is not
mailed to me,
correct. When that shows
don't-
40 feet between the new location and the old location, that plan is not correct.
No, because my house is showing 470.
Right.
Yeah.
The difference is this distance here to here is 40 feet.
Yes.
Right, that's what they're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
But, well, yeah, when I
say you should have had brackets or something
Yeah.
like that.
when I measured 40 feet, it came out.
Can you guys,
Yes, all right.
yeah,
I think we're all talking the same thing here.
I know, we do want to hear what you have to say, but
Yeah, I won't be home till like,
can,
a little after 4, if you could.
okay, we do want to make sure we're all on the same page, but can you contact our office tomorrow just to make sure that we have the correct plans on?
Correct plans, those are the correct plans. You want us to redraw that? Is that what you're saying?
I would say corrected,
Correct it.
because I mean, that,
I don't even know if the guy is working tomorrow that drew that.
I mean, it's.
But I can work on it for you.
I mean, in the notes, if there's notes
I
on the
think we need to
plans-
make,
There's notes on the plans that say, sketch to accompany the petition for the upgrade of the existing JO pole stenciled 670 to a new, I don't know what that means, relocated approximately 40 feet north of the existing location on Stevens Street. So we don't want to say approximately, we want to say 40 feet. Well, I think we heard,
Oh.
Okay.
I
We
think-
always say plus or minus.
well, we agreed that it would be in the dead
It's
space
pretty
between the two
tight down there,
properties.
though, and I think we all agree
Yeah,
that nobody
we've
wants
always
to.
done it that way. We put things
I
not to scale,
understand
and
that,
that's
but this
the
is in
law.
front of somebody's home on a very
understand.
narrow, tight street. No one in this room would say, sure, put the telephone pole right in front of my house. So I think,
order says it.
so I know you've always done it,
I-
but I think this is a good example of that there's give and take.
I'm
sorry,
just-
Laurie,
I'm
what
just-
does the order say?
You-
40 feet.
Approximately 40 feet, yeah.
I was misreading the plan in terms of stating it was incorrect.
It's,
The notation's placed in the front,
You know what?
front spot, but it's not
It's
incorrect.
not
It's not
incorrect.
incorrect. I was misreading.
If you want to stop it tonight, that's fine. And
I mean, we can,
We'll come
we
back.
can take any other comment about this and then we can decide if we want to vote with the clarification of exactly where the
If
pole
you-
is going to be.
And when, yeah,
If
go
you
ahead.
can, if I read you this part of the order, could you tell me that this is exactly what everybody is talking about? To relocate one JO pole on Stevens Street beginning at a point approximately 196 feet northeast of the center line of the intersection of Stevens Street and continuing
Approximately 40
approximately
feet.
40 feet in a north direction.
Yes,
Upgrade existing JO pole stenciled 670 to a new 40/3 and relocate approximately 40 feet north of its existing location on Stevens Street. Does that sound right?
And I
That's what's
think if
in the
we
order.
put in clarification, yeah.
Except it was the intersection of Salem
Yeah,
Street.
Yeah, I think that's.
yeah, that's exactly
Okay.
what we petitioned for. Yep.
Okay, so that is,
Can I then ask you that you will make an attempt, and I think you started to have that conversation with the owner of the property, just to make sure that we're all kind of, because once that pole goes in, it will not be fun to take it back out again.
No, it won't, no.
And the pole in front of the house is being removed, right?
It's
one
gonna
that
go
is
away.
currently in front of the house
That-
will be going away.
That's why we're moving it.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just ask, it's not gonna be like a year before it goes away?
I can't guarantee you anything.
Oh.
We don't remove the poles, it's gonna be
Right.
telephone, so,
That's the problem, because I see a lot of, for the longest times, I've had cables down in front of my house that came off the telephone
Right.
lines that nobody knows whose they are, whether they're Verizon or cell service, and they've hung for like a year, and finally I got one guy to come in and actually put them up from like Verizon. So-
I have a contact, and I'll give you some information, that contact when we leave, if you wanna go out when we
Okay,
leave.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't remove it at the same time. I thought what you said was the spans are now in a reasonable length, that they're gonna
Where they
be
want
nice and tight. So why would you why would the pole stay there after the new poles? Then they would
Because
set-
you got other utilities on the utility pole. You got telephone, you got cable TV, you might have fiber optic.
Yeah, why isn't it all moved at one time? So it's just sinking the pole.
Because I guess the law is there's 30 days for each utility to move off of an old pole.
So
So
there's
it's-
30 days after the,
That is what the state regulates.
Okay.
What you see happen is something different. I understand that.
We get it. We get what
Yes.
you're saying.
And it's nothing that National Grid controls.
So eventually it will go away.
It
And
will.
Hopefully in our lifetime.
And if I give him
Go
a
away.
contact to talk to, I'm sure it'll go a little faster.
okay.
And if it doesn't, just come in and talk to us
Yeah.
because
Chainsaws in the shed.
We'll join you.
I'll get hurt, so.
We don't give you permission to do that.
No, we don't.
Oh, yeah. Because there are other lines that are on there, so I really.
No.
But you know what, I do appreciate that you are making a concerted effort to work with the homeowners in the area.
Oh,
So I
yeah, we
do
always
appreciate
do.
that.
Yep.
You know I could be
I
a little rough
appreciate
sometimes, but, no, you are making a,
Any other
Real
public
effort.
comment about this issue while we're in this public hearing? Any other comments from my
I'll just make note
colleagues?
that I was mistaken. The plan was not incorrect, just a little bit confusing. So that's all.
Okay,
So-
I like that.
On that note, I will take a motion to close the public
Madam Chair, I'll
hearing.
move to close the public hearing for the petition for Mass Electric, DBA National Grid, and Verizon New England to install poles, fixtures, and wires on Stevens Street.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are out of public hearing. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
You want to stay for the vote?
So, item B is our vote on the joint petition that we were just discussing. So, with that being said, I will take a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the joint petition to Massachusetts Electric, DBA National Grid, and Verizon New England to install poles, wires, and fixtures on Stevens Street, subject to all conditions contained in the proposed order.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to item C, a request of the neurofibromatosis Northeast to use Salem, Ingalls, Forest, and Lacey Streets for the Coast to the Cure cycling event. Is anybody here to speak to that? No.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
knowing this group, I would move approval.
And we've
I will
done it,
second.
they've done it many, many years, I think, so.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Moving on to item D, the waiver of the right of first refusal for 129 Cortlandt Drive, Unit 12. pretty standard. I will take a motion and
I'll move that the select board waive the right of first refusal for 129 Cortland Drive, Unit 12.
I have a motion
Second?
and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item E is the appointment of election workers. So,
Madam Chair, I move that the select board appoint all election workers shown on the list provided by Town Clerk Don Warren.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Other than this is a stellar list of great people. For a
Really is.
long, long day.
And we really appreciate, yeah, their willingness to serve. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item F, the reappointment of James Weefers to the Historical Commission. So, based on, I'll take a motion. If
I would move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item G, to appoint Frank Killalay to the zoning board as a full member. He's currently an associate, so
I will move approval.
I have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Item H, special council appointments through June 30th, 2024. So,
For
I-
KP and,
we engage with various outside counsel. This appointment is to use KP Law and Norris, Murray, and Peliquin LLC should the need arise throughout the course of the year between now and June 30th, 2024.
So not for necessarily specific stuff, just
It's-
essentially have on call.
well, other than usually Norris, Murray, and Peliquin tend to be labor law, but that's the difference, whereas KP
It's
fills in
municipal,
for,
Yeah,
And this is a
But we have
yearly-
them just on
essentially
retainer,
available.
This is a yearly
Available.
appointment
Yeah.
that we do.
so they're available.
Move the select board appoint KP Law and Norris, Murray, and Peliquin as special town council through June 30th, 2024.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, we're moving on to item I. And I think there are a lot of people here to talk to us. Let's start working through these ARPA requests. We can start with item 1, the $70,000 request for this community support case manager. Would you like to come up and talk to us?
There she is.
Hi, let us know who you are.
Community Support Coordinator. How are you?
Good, thank you for
How are you?
coming.
I requested the funding to be able to keep the case manager for another year. And as you know, the work of community support has just increased exponentially since the pandemic, and it's been very difficult to keep up with the demand. And it would be just an awful time to lose Crystal in November when the current funding ends. So the request is to keep her on for another year.
And this is with the ARPA funds.
With the ARPA funding, yes.
And this seems like what the ARPA funding's for.
Yes.
Right,
Yep.
to
Yeah.
support the
Bridge those
community
gaps and
and
support the
coming out
community.
of COVID. And that's exactly what this, what Crystal does.
I think you're right, it's coming out of COVID, but it's also our veterans, and I think all of us in the room know that the veterans have, and our VSO, he can also collaborate that they have their struggles.
Absolutely.
Tremendously.
In our department, we see folks throughout the whole lifespan and with all circumstances, veterans, single parents, the elderly, folks who already had issues prior to the pandemic, folks who just began to have issues in the pandemic. So we really collaborate with all the departments. Veterans, actually, Joe and I were just discussing someone that is a shared client. We collaborate with the school department, with the library, you know, all the departments. So it's very much a joint effort.
No, sadly, you turn on the news every single night and you see how this country is impacted by so many things that involve mental illness, depression, suicide. So I agree with Dick that this is what it's meant for, and it's money well spent.
I'll take a motion.
I have a couple
questions,
quick questions. Yeah, I think this is something that was probably clearly needed prior to the availability of ARPA funds. Is this
Yes.
something you envision becoming a permanent
Yes.
roll down the road?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
Which leads to a whole host of other questions, but,
My question, Brian.
oh, sorry.
Funding through the opioid settlement.
I jumped the line.
Yes.
Where were residents turning to before the availability of this position? What happened when they had a need or a case?
Well, prior to Crystal coming on, it was just me for a couple of years, which wasn't enough, which is why we had Crystal. And before I came on, people just struggled.
There's
you know,
no
just struggled.
state resource,
And-
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and turn to whatever natural supports they had, you know, whatever social supports that were built into their lives, which for some folks, you know, luckily North Andover residents, some of them naturally have that. But we know that there are a lot who do not. So a lot of folks were just quietly suffering and struggling. And you would see a lot of that burden was picked up by the schools, by the different systems that are kind of catch-alls for folks in difficult positions.
I just lost my train of thought for a quick point. Is Crystal, the case manager at this point, at capacity? Are you turning away cases?
We don't turn away, but we
Without overworking yourselves, I
Yeah.
suppose, yeah.
We work around the clock. We carry our phones and keep them on 24/7. We respond, we're embedded in the police department, and we respond to calls around the clock. So if there is an issue that the police department or fire department thinks requires support, they will call us and we respond. So it's not that we are turning people away, it's that we work more. Yeah,
You're doing great work.
Thank you for that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all you're doing. It's important.
I'll take a motion.
I will move approval.
I seconded
I have
it.
a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2 is an ARPA request for $45,000 for radios for the schools. Is anybody here to talk to us about that? What is the?
I have to say, when I first read this, I'm like, $45,000 for radios for the kids at school? Do they really want radios? But when you
No.
read it, it's a
Yes.
different type of
Yes.
that is used for pretty much safety and
Yep,
things like that. So,
exactly, to make sure they can communicate. But
so it's not
regardless to police.
Plus,
and
they
fire.
have their phones. What do they need radios for now?
Did I miss it in the application, how many radios that gets us?
Oh,
It's just one for each, it's just one for each office, okay, great. Expensive
We're
radios.
replacing the analog for the digital, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yep,
So it's one for each school?
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's up.
Makes sense. I mean, analog's pretty old, and digital is,
You're the
Yeah, I think
table
so, yeah.
expert on that kind of stuff.
Wouldn't we need one for ABCs?
They might,
Oh, maybe they already have it.
maybe,
The
maybe,
newer,
because they're
The
new,
newer.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did their math.
I'm sure,
Yeah. I move the select board approve the ARPA request in the amount of $45,000 for radios for the schools.
I will second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item 3, $17,000 for AED and CPR training for the school department. I think that. I'm here if you have questions. Okay, we have Cheryl here if anybody has questions, but I think this is pretty
I have a
standard.
comment. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I really do. And thank you for, I can't help but imagine that you were part of making this all happen. you know, if your kid is hurt, and we've had troubles in the past where children have died on the field.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
The
The only question I do have, though, and I think I know the answer, but I feel as though it deserves the question. Our own fire department does do this type of training, or maybe it's just in part, Cheryl, that you can
So
explain.
I work really closely with Jeff Duchesne in the fire
Yes,
department.
he's wonderful. Yeah.
And we've collaborated, we've purchased equipment together, but now we got a little bit behind with COVID for the 2 years, and we have a lot more training to do now. So with another grant, we had 10 nurses trained to become instructors, and we're really expanding our program now. And now there are new requirements where all coaches need to have AEDs, so the number of people to be trained in the schools has really grown, and we need more equipment. That's what we put together in this request, so that we can purchase some of the mannequins that provide really great feedback, and we can provide more training opportunities for our crisis team, as well as all of the coaches and staff. We also implement now 6th grade training and 9th grade training, so there's a lot of new opportunities for everybody. And anybody in the community that would like to be trained, we would offer that as well.
They do that, and the North Andover Women's Club had a training session, and not only did you learn a lot, it was great fun, and Jeff is a fantastic teacher,
Yes,
so,
great.
yeah, if you haven't done it, everybody should do it. You
Yes,
just never
you
know.
should. I almost brought a mannequin, but I know these meetings
Come
can be
back
long.
again.
All right. Thank you.
Cheryl, just so everybody knows, there's a minimum requirement for staff that is trained in each school, correct?
Yes,
That's the
yes.
state law?
Yep, and
Okay.
we
Which
meet that.
I think it's just, no, I know, I think it's good for people to know that there is a minimum requirement and there's plenty of staff, there's a lot of
Yes,
staff
and we
that
have
is trained.
we have equipment in every
Yep.
one of our schools as well.
And the AEDs are there.
Yes.
and it's comforting to hear, you know what that's all I'm saying.
But this will be able to bring us
Yeah,
well above the
above
minimum,
that,
right?
yep.
Yes.
And
Yep.
get really important people like coaches and teachers that are really, they're the ones will be there first to be trained.
Because they're the first respond.
Absolutely.
And maybe some of the big kids too, as you said.
Yeah, I'm excited about the possibility of joining in, so thank you.
Thanks.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Any other
much.
questions right now? If not, I will take a motion.
Move approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other questions?
No, it's great.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Item 5, $25,000 for a community resource dog at the police
Nope,
department.
we skipped number 4.
Oh, sorry. Item 4, $20,000, I know, I'm sorry, Joe. $20,000 for support of local veterans. Come on up. Got ahead of myself, my apologies.
Madam Chair, members of the Select Board, I respectfully request $20,000. The request is for support to family members and their dependents of veterans. So it'll help with any gaps in services, anything like that. I mean, obviously, we have the VA, healthcare, and we have the state Chapter 115 program, but not everybody qualifies for those programs, so it would be unique just for our North Andover veterans.
And it would be an application process, and you might help with things like bills, like.
Yes, I have copies of the application if you'd like to see them.
It's okay, I
I
just,
think it was in our packet.
Yeah, we simplified it.
yeah,
It was,
yeah.
it was much more complex, but it's very simplified, just proof that they're a resident, proof that they're a veteran or the family member of, and then just what the need is.
sure,
So pretty straightforward.
sounds great.
How do you get the information out to the veterans so that they know it's available?
Well, so we could do that through social media, through word of mouth, through meetings at the VFW, through flyers. There's plenty of words, plenty of ways. Word of mouth is usually the best, but I'm sure it'll, plus folks coming into our office, right? We'll see the need right there and then, so it'll be pretty,
And we can point people in your direction too,
yes,
certainly.
by all means.
Yeah,
And I see
Appreciate
it's gonna be capped at $1,400 and it'll be approved by the town manager.
Yeah, if there was anything over, it would have to be approved by Melissa.
For assistance?
Yes.
Oh, okay, over. Okay.
Does the money need to be spent by a certain time, or we just need to allocate it by a certain time as a result of because it's ARPA funds?
So that was one of the conversations we had with Andrew, so.
So they have to spend the money by the end of 2026?
Yes.
Okay,
That's not bad.
okay.
should be, no problem.
How'd you arrive at the $20,000 number?
I just picked
Went up
a
more?
number.
That's what I'm
I
wondering.
want a number that we get approved. and- Sorry, just being honest. I could have went higher, but no, I actually asked the request for both towns, from Boxford as well.
Okay.
Being a part-time employee for them, we were trying to do the same. That one's still, I'm still waiting, but North Andover continues to lead the way, you know, with regards to what we do for our veterans.
Joe, how much need do you actually see? Do you, I mean, is this demonstrated need that you've seen recently or in the near past, or?
I think there's always been a need. I mean, it's tough. There are times, there are people who clearly qualify for Chapter 115, but they're mostly surviving spouses. And then we have couples that are probably borderline or in the gray, which is where a lot of our work is. Deanna can attest to that. So they're probably slightly over, and that's where we would use something like the ARPA funds. But yeah, a lot of times it's, you know, everything's income asset based. The state was good about bringing up the income assets for Chapter 115. Chapter 115 is a state program for assistance that's already in play, for those who maybe don't know. But this would be town specific. So it would be us helping our veterans.
Any other questions? If not, I will take a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can you indulge me for just 1 second, Madam Chair? I want to speak to this gentleman at the podium. Talk about someone who works 24/7. He
Absolutely.
attended the birthday event of a 100-year-old veteran, not that he served for 100 years, but he's 100 years old, and
World War II.
presented World War II, Ernie Romano, and presented him with a proclamation and made the family very happy that you remembered that he served his country and served it well. So I had to indulge him.
Joe is top notch.
He's top notch. Thank you.
Lucky to have him. Thank you.
Anytime we can honor our veterans while they're still with us is,
Yeah.
that's the best. So.
You never forget it.
Thank you.
You
Well,
never
while
forget.
while we have you there,
There we go.
let's also mention the new renovated Vietnam Memorial that is at the high school
Yes.
that now lists all those veterans who actually served in Vietnam. And it's
Vietnam
an-
era, correct.
Vietnam era, and it's an incredible list of town people that have served during that time frame. And again, a tremendous job collecting all those names. I know it wasn't easy because a lot of the records were lost in the fire in St. Louis. So it was a difficult time getting all those records and getting all those names. And some names are still coming in, but we'll
Yes.
get them on there. But, I mean, you did a tremendous job. I mean, it's just
Thank you.
amazing. And I've talked to some of the veterans whose names are there, and they're just in awe of it, and that they were still remembered this many years later for having served.
Well, I can't do what I do without the select board, without the town, without the support I get here, so.
And vice versa, truly. You keep us informed and, you know, it's really great that you're always communicating with us
I
about what we
brag
need.
I brag on North Andover all the time. I'm a member of the E-Board with our association, and I tell them what we're doing. And, I mean, we increased the tax exemption for veterans. I didn't, the assessor did. So that's not the case in every town.
Well, thank you,
so-
Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
We already voted.
We're going,
We're good, we voted, and then we
You can go home
gotta.
early tonight.
Okay, now we are on to,
Did we vote? Maybe we should just.
okay, let's just do it again. I thought
We voted.
We
Dick moved
voted,
it,
and
Rosemary
then,
seconded it.
and then,
Yeah.
yeah, and then Rosemary wanted to talk, so.
Discussion.
Uh,
Yes, you're right.
Just stay there.
Oh, Gibbs, we missed Gibbs.
Item 5, $25,000 request for community resource dog at the police department. I think that Officer Wilson and his whole family is here to talk to us about this.
They don't want to talk.
Oh, okay. All in the back row?
Yes.
Yeah, they're back there for support. Mark Wilson, North Andover Police Department. Been on the department for 19 years. Also lived in town my whole life. We live on 10 Duncan Drive.
How do we replace Gibbs?
We replace Gibbs. We can't replace Gibbs.
That's
We're
the idea.
we're getting another Gib 2.0 is what I like to say. So, what was I going to say? So through these funds, we're hoping to get another dog. And I'm on the community impact unit we started about a year and a half ago. It's a community policing unit. I try to get out as many places, and I think with the dog, I can go even further than Gibbs did. Gibbs did a lot, but I hope to expand on that with a new dog.
Will you be the trainer?
Yes, I would be the handler.
Sorry.
Yep, and I would go to training. The litter is due actually this weekend, so it'd be 8 weeks from then that we could go early and look at the dogs, and they would pick one that would be best suited temperament-wise once they get closer to 8 weeks, and then there would be training for the next year plus, where I would go there Monday through Thursday for the first 6 months, 4 days a week, from 9 to 12, and then the day would go it would decrease by a day every couple months.
What's the breed?
Golden Retriever, just like Gibbs. It's a English, it's a light colored dog. And if it, not to change things, but my wife and sons picked a name already. If we do get approved, we're looking to get a female, and they picked the name Scarlet for Scarlet Knights.
I love that.
Yep.
Carl will see a lot of lemonade stands.
Yes, she'll be at lemonade stands, farmers markets.
Yes.
I hope to work with, we're going to work with, obviously, Deanna and Crystal and Veteran Affairs. And I'm also an SRO, so I'm in the schools a lot also. So we kind of thought, before Gibbs was he was with the school resource officer, but now I'm outside, but now I can expand broader reach and also still have access in the schools if they need. And to visit
Right
the
now,
children.
Officer Wilson has to bring his own dog around. So,
I think it's great. I know that
Fantastic.
the
there has
kids
been a
were-
lot of
yeah.
outcry about missing
About
Gibbs,
Gibbs,
so I
yes.
think that everybody will be
I was excited to see it.
excited about this.
And I want
Does
to
anyone
say,
have questions?
I want to say thank you to the family for welcoming a new dog into your home and to help your dad and the town keep us safe. And maybe just sometimes just bring a little love and joy into other
Exactly.
people's lives.
Yep.
So thank you for that. You guys were all part of it too. Everybody, okay, you want to vote with us when we make it? Mama, you're going to hold hands down like, I don't know, who's going to feed and walk the dog?
Any other questions from the board?
No.
No, that's great.
On that note, I'll take a motion.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to
it.
meeting Scarlett. Okay. Item 6, $750,000 for repairs and upgrades to the water line on Sutton Street at Marblehead Street. I am guessing that we have someone to talk to us. Hello.
Good evening. John Borghese, the town engineer. So this submittal, I'll give you a little background. Essentially, upon review of the town's water distribution system, 2 sections of 8-inch existing cast iron water main were identified as having the potential for fracturing. The 8-inch cast iron water main is located on Sutton Street and Marblehead Street underneath the railroad tracks. So both sections are currently unlined cast iron pipe. Cast iron pipe is more brittle and therefore more susceptible to fracturing over time. Not to mention being located underneath the railroad tracks, there's even, if there is ever a break, this could have devastating effects. So the ARPA request is for the funds to design, permit, and install a structural liner inside the existing 8-inch cast iron water main. The approximately $250,000 of the request will be for the design and permitting, and the remaining $500,000 will be for the construction. The design and permitting is anticipated to take approximately 6 months for completion, and construction is anticipated to take approximately 1 month. I'll open it up to any questions you may have.
What is the excavation required, or is it direct, like sort of direct drill?
So, yeah, so what we're going to do is the structural lining allows us, obviously, we're not going to rip up the railroad tracks. That's why we're going with a structural liner, because typically we could just replace this section. So what we're going to do is you dig 2 pits on either side of the railroad tracks. You excavate down to the water main. You expose the existing water main. We shut it down, and then we actually cut it. So that way railroad can continue, operating. We're just in the roadways. We would plate them during the evening time and, so we can open the roads back up, that type of deal. And then you hire a contractor. Essentially, they'll come in, they'll clean the existing line first. They TV it, and then they do like this spray liner, which is a structural liner, which gives it the stability that you're looking for long-term to minimize any potential for future fracturing. I will mention that this is the last section of unlined cast iron pipe that we have in town. Everywhere else, it's a combination of either cement-lined cast iron or cement-lined ductile iron.
So it's 125 years old. What are you saying? It's out of date?
Yeah. So, yeah, this was installed, in 1900?
1898.
1898, yeah. So,
Gotta get
yeah, so it's a little old, yeah.
Do you,
Go ahead, Marcia.
just a friendly reminder, we did have some work done in, I think it's that area, I'm getting my Sutton Streets confused, where there was other piping underneath a building. Were you,
So is that the Pride Craft, or are you talking about the drainage work for the dance studio?
the dance studio?
Was it that one?
It
Yes.
was that one, so I just thought I would remind you, just to,
Yes, yep,
you
no,
might want to just look at that over again.
sure.
He wasn't responsible, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
this is a long time ago.
Yeah, that
but
was
it
before-
was a-
before I
It was
was
a
here.
surprise.
Yes,
I got quite
yes.
the phone call that when they found out.
Yeah, so that was,
But they were
based on
very
what I
nice.
was told, I believe it was remedied during that.
I
You
believe
worked
it
with
was,
the
I believe
developer,
it was
right, and
too,
the
I'm
owners.
almost positive
Yeah.
it was. And the people who own the building were very good about it.
Yes.
They understood, but I just don't want you surprised again.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, this one should be a little easier because we know where the water main is. We're just staying in the roadway. And again, like I said, we're just excavating 2 pits on either side of the railroad tracks. And that's the extent of where we're going to disturb, is
Okay.
those 2 areas.
So I guess a couple of questions, right? So there's 2 crossings, but the project isn't contiguous, right? It's 2 essentially 2
Correct.
standalone projects?
Just where the railroad
Okay.
tracks are, under the 2 sections of railroad track.
I think I counted 80 weeks for permitting, which I think surprised me, but I assume the MBTA is a big chunk of that?
Yeah, so the permitting is 6 months. Our engineering consultant estimated 3 to 6 months. The permitting I've done before with the railroad, it can get pretty involved, which is understandable, especially because we're maintaining the trains and the railroad during construction, so they want to make sure we kind of examine, or our consultant and engineer examine everything that's going on, evaluating the structural integrity of excavating the pits and all that. So it's mostly the permitting.
And what would you anticipate for service interruptions for business and residences?
I anticipate that we never like to fully shut roads down, especially these 2 roads, as busy as they are. So it would be a situation where we may have to close 1 lane down and then, have
Water service?
police details. So the water service, we should be able to backfeed the services. There's actually only 1 water service, which is, I believe, the Pridecraft building, but we will work with them to figure out, we'll make sure they still have water. That's the only service we need to worry about.
One last question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just a question about the guidelines for ARPA funding. Can you outline how this fits the guidelines for ARPA funding?
So I think one of the main highlights for the ARPA funding was specifically for infrastructure, especially water and sewer infrastructure, which this is the water infrastructure for the town, and definitely one of the critical areas that it's the perfect project for the ARPA funds.
Well, thank you for thinking of it and submitting it.
Yeah, well, I submitted, but it's definitely everyone else at DPW. We're fortunate to have Tim Willett with the water sewer manager, who's been here for quite a few years and has done a great job. So he was the one who identified the project for Jim and I.
Great. I was just curious about the paving, because we just did Marblehead, right? Is it gonna
Yeah,
impact any
it's
of that?
passed.
It's passed
It's
now.
passed. Well, it will, I think we went on one side, because I don't think we crossed over on the other side of the tracks. It is going to impact on the closer, on one side.
Okay.
Again, we try to minimize the, and again, the excavation will only be big enough for what they need to essentially get the equipment down to the water main. Because I do want to still be able to keep the road open, at least one lane.
And then when they go back to pave, will it just be a patch, or will they be able to kind
So,
of like feather it in?
We could look at that. Probably the biggest caveat is going to be cost. It always
Of
comes
course.
down to construction cost. But if we can, we can do like a curb to curb, for that section on both sides. That would be the best way.
Yeah.
So
If
it's
we
just
could do
pending
that,
on the
yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Yep.
Will we just
Or else
talk-
it's just
well,
gonna
yeah.
be.
Yeah, I know,
It's
I
gonna be
know.
If we don't do that.
Yep.
I can tell you all the rest of them too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions or comments? And if not, I will take a motion.
Move the select board approve the ARPA request in the amount of $750,000 for repairs and upgrades to the water line at Sutton Street at Marblehead Street.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I think you might be here for the next one too.
I'm just gonna stay here.
Just hang up.
I am going to.
Item 7, $243,500 for improvements at the intersection of Sutton High and Chadwick. All right.
Yes, so as the board likely knows, the town had received funding from the state through the Complete Streets program for the redesign and reconstruction of the Sutton High Chadwick intersection to make the intersection safer for both vehicles and pedestrians. The project was actually put out to bid in May, and 2 bids were received. The low bidder was identified as Tasco Construction, and their bid totaled approximately $600,000. The total grant funds received was approximately $400,000. The reason for the discrepancy is believed to be because of the inflation and the volatility of the construction market. So this request is actually for the difference between the grant funds available and the low bid that we received. Upon approval of the ARPA funds, since we've already gone out to bid, the town would be able to execute a contract with Tasco Construction with the anticipation of starting in mid-August. Construction is anticipated to be complete by late October. Of course, this is pending the availability of the materials. And happy to answer any questions.
Same old song and dance for you, right, every day?
It's all good.
Materials and people.
Oh, yeah, and cost.
Love this one. This one needs to be done.
This is
This is an
exciting.
important one. Yeah.
Very
Yep.
dangerous.
I agree.
And will this tie into the paving that's being done on High Street?
I was thinking the same
Oh.
thing, but I didn't know if I want to.
Yes, so this is going to happen, first. This project, the paving on High Street, so I have that currently out to bid. Right now, a whole bunch of paving in the annual roads program. The bids are due in next Monday. So then I will essentially try to coordinate, and in that bid, the way I set it up, because again, the fluctuation with the cost is stressed, so trying to figure out what's what. So I set that up with kind of a priority ranking. Gives us the ability to kind of pick and choose with I have 3 primary roads, Great Pond, Chestnut, and High Street, which those will be first. So those will get paved, and then we can look at the other roads I included in there. But yeah,
It all
so
works, it works
it's,
together,
yeah, I'm trying to combine it together. And on High Street, we're also looking at when we redo that to redo the sidewalk that's there too, because there's almost no separation in some areas between the roadway and the sidewalk, which and you never like to have that. You want to at least have, some kind of elevation difference so pedestrians can feel a little safer.
And will the paving continue? I think the cutoff is almost in front of Statues, right, where the new paving starts?
Yes, so, yep, the paving's gonna go all the way to, essentially, so back when we did the intersection project, we we came a little ways down and then we stopped. That's essentially, we're going to start there and then we're going to go all the way to Sutton.
Okay, I know they'll be happy.
Yes.
They're very happy, so.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I will take a motion.
Move the select board approve the ARPA request in the amount of $243,500 for improvements at the intersection of Sutton High and Chadwick.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Okay. We are going to head into licensing. So
Madam Chair.
I will take a motion.
I move to open a meeting of the North Andover Licensing Commission.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are now in licensing. Okay, so the first item on the agenda for licensing is an application from Jay-Z Inc., DBA Nikki's Roast Beef, 208 Sutton Street, for new wine malt on the premises liquor license. Is Mr. Singh here? Thank you. So could you say your name, your address? I'm sorry, what?
You have to open the public hearing.
Oh, you're right. I will entertain a motion to open a public, just one moment.
So moved.
Do we have a
Second.
and
Second, yeah.
seconded? All those in favor of?
Aye.
Aye.
Is aye. Now you may speak. Just speak loudly and clearly into the microphone, name
Okay.
and address, and welcome.
Thank you, first of all, everybody. My name is Harpreet Singh, and 5 months ago, I was here for a common victualler license, and I got that from you guys, and I truly appreciate all of you guys and people of North Andover for accepting us. It's been good so far, great, and I wanted to add something more to our business, and we added a few items, and now one of the things I wanted to add was this, especially for people who dine in. Obviously, beer and wine, it's going to be for dine-in, but yeah, if you have any questions.
Any questions from the board?
How many people do you seat in your restaurant?
It's about 28. I do have a vision and a plan that I want to proceed in the future if I get permission for outdoor seating. That's one of the things I want to move forward, maybe in future. But for now, we have 28.
28. Okay. And you have a drive-through, so I know you said on premise, so there's no handing through the drive-through, right?
Yeah, there's no-
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That's something I thought about all the bad and other things that could go in the wrong direction. And before coming here, I had a meeting with my landlord too. She wanted to come here, but she was not available.
Do you have any plans to get any kind of a license scanner or something to validate licenses? Because, I mean, obviously you're I don't want to, discredit your business. I'm not gonna, but I mean, it's like a sandwich shop, pizza shop, roast beef shop. So there's a lot of probably younger people that come in to dine there. So do you have a plan to check licenses?
Yes,
and
sir.
to validate licenses? Yeah.
Yes, that's a plan, to have something that we could take care of the ID and scan the ID and keep record of that.
Okay.
Do you have a liquor license at your other you have other restaurants, right? And
No.
You don't, okay. I'm just curious.
This was the first one,
The first one.
and
A couple of things, touching upon what Selectman Valencourt said. So the scanners are good, but if it's an out-of-state license and it passes, that doesn't mean that you should necessarily take a chance on it, because out-of-state licenses are not valid for receiving liquor. So just keep that in mind. They are pretty good, but be careful.
I will. So 11 years ago, I moved here as an immigrant, as a student. So all this ID, how it works, I'm very well aware of that, and I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, you really should keep that in mind.
I will.
And just to mention, also, we are a college town. We do have a lot of young people, and they often, they'll try to give you their college ID, or they'll give you, And again, just keep that out of state is not accepted as a true form of identification for receiving liquor. So please do keep that in mind and consider this fair warning.
Absolutely, thank you.
We're pretty strict. So consider that this is fair warning, and the best advice, I think, is don't take any chances. It's just not worth it.
We will not.
Okay.
Thank
so
you.
That's my comment, is I give that to everyone. It's not just you. Lucky you.
No, thank you, thank
Everybody
you.
gets a speech, so.
Yeah, we want you to be successful, so.
And safe.
I appreciate it.
Anything else from the board?
Business has been good so far?
It's been good. All I can say is thank you to the people of the town, and all of you, for letting me. Somebody, like I said, moved here 10 years ago, 11 years ago as a student alone, and doing all these things.
Good for you,
I
yeah,
apologize.
that's great.
Excited for you.
Thank you so much.
Anything from anybody in the audience? Any comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing for the application from Jay-Z Inc., DBA Nikki's Roast Beef, 208 Sutton Street for a new wine and malt on-premises liquor license.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous vote. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well,
That's
that was
just
just to
close
close
public
the.
hearing.
Oh, sorry. I think I went out of order.
No, you close the hearing and now we'll vote.
Okay, now we're going to vote.
I'll move the select board acting as licensing commissioners approve the application of Jay-Z Inc., DBA Nikki's Roast Beef, 208 Sutton Street, for a new wine and malt on-premise liquor license.
Seconded.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I just wanted to have you hear it again.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Thank you. Okay, so next item on the agenda is a public hearing for application for transfer of restaurant all alcohol liquor license from Aglio? Am I pronouncing it? Please correct me. Okay, thank you. Inc. to Orzo LLC, 1085 Osgood Street. So I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Madam Chair, I'll move to open the public hearing for the application for a transfer of the restaurant all alcohol liquor license from Aglio Inc. to Orzo LLC, 1085 Osgood Street.
I'll second.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now in public hearing. And you know the drill. Please identify yourself and so forth.
Hi, how are you? My name is Jonathan Rossi. I'm the attorney for Orzo LLC over in Morris Rossi and Hayes office over in Andover.
Oh, yeah, I think
Yes.
I'm a real estate broker, so
Yes.
I've probably been there before.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Rosemary, yep. Thank you for your time. Before I get started, I'd love to say the work that you guys do, the money that's being given out, that's fantastic, especially for the schools, the dog, that's amazing. Like I said, I'm here on behalf of Orzo. It is a 3-member LLC. 2 of the members are here, as well as the manager for the liquor license. Orzo's Trattoria has obviously been in North Andover for quite some time. The owners have decided to move on. My clients were more than willing to take that restaurant on. The manager, Anthony Buccieri, I didn't want to butcher that, has plenty of experience in the restaurant business. Robert Barry owns a sub shop in Lawrence. So I believe the restaurant will be in good hands. There aren't going to be any changes. We don't have to, floor plans aren't going to change. The entertainment is still the same with the big screen TV that I've filled out already. So there aren't really many changes. It just seemed like it was time for the sellers to move on. In that area, I've been there plenty of times. I grew up in Methuen, and obviously I work in Andover, so I've been to Orzo's plenty of times. So, any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I guess, does Mr. Barry's other restaurant serve alcohol in Lawrence? It does not,
No,
okay.
it does not. No.
Do you hold any other liquor licenses in the state?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, tip certified is a big thing.
I worked in Orzo growing up, so yes.
Oh, you
I
did?
worked there for 6 years, it was my first
Oh, wow.
I don't think I knew that, so I would have led with that. But it's all right.
Coming full circle.
I don't think I was aware of that. So.
Yeah, just really familiarize yourself with the rules and regulations of the ABCC. And you heard my speech on get the machine, don't trust if it's an out-of-state.
I leaned over to them and I said, she's going to say the same to us.
Yeah, told them to listen and repeat
Correct.
after her.
I've been in front of here before for, I believe, for Casablanca and North Andover. And
Oh,
that,
yeah.
I believe, I don't know if you were here at that time, but I
Oh,
think
I've been here a lot.
they were told that same speech. So
Yeah, and it
I've
was
heard
from-
it.
And it was from me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've been here a long time.
Yeah.
Any other questions or anything from the board? Anything from the audience? No. Okay, hearing
Chair
none.
will move that we close the hearing.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, and that's a unanimous vote. And with that, I'll entertain another motion.
I will move, where are we? Thank you. Move that the select board, acting as licensing commissioners, approve the application for transfer of restaurant all alcohol license from Aglio Inc. to Orzo's LLC, 1085 Osgood Street.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And now I can say congratulations, and I'll say it twice, congratulations. And really thank the family and the friends that have owned it. It has been a wonderful
I will
addition
add-
to the town.
I will have the two partners will be staying on for 6 months to help out with
Oh,
the
nice.
transition, so.
Okay. Yeah,
to
it's a,
keep it moving
it's a
forward.
nice little place, and it's really, they've done a great job
Yes.
for North Andover.
I'm happy to hear you're not changing
Yes, and
anything.
then you're staying, yeah.
Don't
Unless
mess
you're
with the good
bringing one
thing.
of your grandmother's old-fashioned recipes that would just further enhance, but no, it's a great place, and it was nice people that have run it for years, so. Did I forget something?
No, I just want, well, no. There was on the application a new entertainment license and a common vic.
Correct.
And that didn't get put on the agenda listed separately, so we're going to put it on the August 7th agenda.
Okay.
But it shouldn't hold anything up for you because it's going to take a while for ABCC to get your information. So you don't have to appear again.
You don't
I would
have
imagine
to.
you would.
I was just going to say good because I'm away.
Oh, yeah, so I apologize.
I
for-
could zoom in from South Carolina if you
Yeah.
needed me to.
Oh, great place, South Carolina.
Apologize for not having that on there,
That's-
but it was just noticed that the application contained more than the transfer, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
it shouldn't be a problem, so not to.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Glad
Congratulations.
to have you guys in
Good
town.
luck.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is
It's E. Trustees.
I'm sorry?
It's E. Just,
Oh, okay. The application from the trustees of reservation, mine's on the flip side. Application from the trustees of reservation for a one-day wine and malt liquor license on July 28th, 2023, from 6 PM to 8 PM for a summer concert. Do we have anyone here? You know the drill.
Good evening, Jeremy Dick from the trustees.
We've had you here before, I think, haven't we? Have you come before yet?
Yes, oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. Have at it.
So yes, we're just looking for the one evening liquor license for that event. It's a summer concert, part of our series. We have five concerts this year. And we'll have food vendors there, including Blanche's Ice Cream and I think Trace Latina's food truck that night, along with Notch Brewing.
Okay.
It'll be just a beer only.
Okay, and it appears as though that, oh my goodness, this isn't a public hearing, is it? No, I got my wrong. That there was no concerns from fire, police, health department, and building department. Did they put in a condition for a police officer? No? Okay, I'm not seeing it.
Question, same
no,
thing,
I think because the
How
parking
many,
is now better.
how many participants or how many attendees do you think will be there?
We're generally selling 150 tickets for these events. We have some people from the neighborhood who walk in, and we have some volunteer people who come as well. So
It's been kind of a rough year for having events with all the rain and everything.
Canceled last Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Remind me, is the building open for these events?
not during, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. The bathrooms are, but not the
house.
the historic home. No.
Any further questions, concerns? Nothing? I mean, seems pretty clean.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval.
A second.
Motion for approval and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and I hope it doesn't rain.
No problems all around tonight.
Yes, we all do.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll motion that we move out of licensing.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. To move out of licensing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we are now out of licensing.
Okay.
Only an hour behind schedule.
It's all right, we're gonna have the planning board come on in.
Only an hour late.
Apologies. It's just the way it goes.
We all scooting around?
I know, I can slide.
Plenty of room over here.
Yeah, we've got.
Chair and everything for you.
It's coming to me.
Are we moving in one direction or should we?
Does everybody have a seat? That's really. Are we good? Are there enough spots for everybody? We're all in place? So this is the joint meeting with our planning board that was to start at 7:30 PM. We are already in session. If you guys would like to open your meeting.
What am I supposed to say tonight, Shane?
Planning board meetings coming to order.
Oh, that's not, the planning board meeting will come to order at 8:30?
8:27, give us those.
Sorry about those 3 minutes.
Okay. And now we are going to see a presentation by the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission regarding the MBTA community's 3A compliance. So welcome.
So I'm just going to let Gerard just go right into his introduction.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Good evening, North Andover Select Board and Planning Board. My name is Gerard Witten. I'm the Executive Director with Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. And while I've worked with some of you over the years, I wanted to use this as an opportunity in this new role to introduce myself to you and also tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing most recently. So for context, MVPC is one of 13 regional planning agencies that cover the state of Massachusetts. And we work with the 15 cities and towns here in the Merrimack Valley. We are your regional planning agency. And with that comes our overall mission, which is to promote the orderly and sustained growth of the region. Now, practically speaking, what that means is we have 4 different program areas. And within our program areas, we have technical staff, planners, and our goal really is to work with you and your municipal staff to help you on different projects, and in particular to help you to achieve compliance with federal and state legislation. Now, tonight we're here to talk about some legislation that was put forward by the state a couple years ago. This is legislation that the state is promoting as a way to increase housing production across the state. And with this legislation, the state is requiring that every community that is on or adjacent to the MBTA system to create a zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right. It's called the MBTA Communities legislation. Now, our role as an organization has been to work with your planning staff to help translate what does that legislation actually mean for North Andover, and to look at some of the different areas in town that the town may want to consider for compliance. So as we get into this conversation, I want to emphasize that we recognize there are a number of issues surrounding this legislation. And it's our role as an organization to provide as much information as we can to you to help you make an informed decision about how you want to proceed with this legislation. Now, I mentioned that we have a group of technical experts, and this is a great opportunity for me to introduce Ian Burns,
who heads up our Community and Economic Development Program. He's also grown up here in North Andover, and he happens to be a subject matter expert when it comes to MBTA communities legislation. And so tonight we have a brief presentation that we've put together for you, and our intent really here is to talk about what this legislation means to the town, talk to you a little bit about the areas that we've been exploring with Jean and Andrew, and really to have an open dialogue about other ways that we can provide or assist you in generating information and in looking at different areas to help you make this decision about how you want to proceed with regard to compliance with this state regulation. So with that, I want to thank you for having me and introduce Ian.
Thank you, Gerard. We saved the best part of the agenda for last, right? As Gerard mentioned, Ian Burns went to Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. I think I met some of you probably a year and a half or 2 years ago now when I came with another one of my colleagues to this board to talk about a addition initiative we were working on. I'm going to go through a little bit of background about the regulations and what they are requiring all of our cities and towns in this region to zone for. Andrew and Jean, we've been working very closely with them to identify potential districts, as we'll talk about, and Andrew and Jean are going to comment on some of those districts that we have since identified and give you a little bit of an overview of how we came to that conclusion. And what we're going to do first is talk about those regulations. When I get to the end of that, I'd be happy to answer some questions that you all have about the regulations so that we're all on the same page. I know some of you have learned about them before and some of you have not, so I just want to make sure we all have an understanding, and then we'll talk about those districts. But of course, at any point in the presentation, feel free to interject with questions. Happy to answer them. This is supposed to be a learning experience and an experience for us to get feedback and learn from all of you about what you want to see with this implementation. So with that, I'm going to hop right in to the actual regulations here. And so thinking about why are these regulations happening, why did the state put these forward? As many of you are probably aware, we are facing a pretty extreme housing crisis here in Massachusetts. That is a direct result of the lack of housing production we've had in the state. So this first graph is just an example to show you the decrease in housing production here in the state. The yellow bars there are single-family housing permits, and the blue bar is multifamily housing permits. And what the takeaway here is, looking at the 30-year period from 1960 to 1990, you had pretty substantial housing production. And then from those 30 years, from 1990 to about 2020, you had a significant reduction in housing production. And that has left us with that estimated shortage of about 200,000 housing units. And that has also left us with what many of us see across this town and across this region and the state of just skyrocketing rents and skyrocketing home prices. The purpose of this legislation was taking a look and seeing what are we missing here in the state and what is that lack of production leading to, and looking at that missing middle housing. And the lack of missing middle housing is the term that we use when referring to the type of housing this legislation is intended to help produce. And so that is essentially getting at your 2, 3, 4 unit complexes all the way up to some larger complexes. You'll notice all the way on the right you have mid to high rise on this graph, and all the way on the left you have detached single family homes. Those aren't the types of housing that we're looking to permit necessarily under this legislation, really identifying that missing middle, those starter homes and those 2, 3 bedroom apartment units that can help more folks have choice of where they want to live. I'm not going to read the full text of this, but we just wanted to show you exactly what the legislation says and what the statute is requiring. So in bold are the key points here. Each community that is adjacent to or home to a commuter rail stop has to create one district of what they call reasonable size that is allowing multifamily housing permitted as of right. Within that district, you have to be able to create housing at a density of 15 units per acre. And then if you are near a commuter rail station, it cannot be more than 0.5 miles from a commuter rail station. That is not applicable for North Andover.
Can I ask just
Yeah.
one question? When 15 units per acre, is that subject to, like, are wetlands excluded when you calculate that?
Correct.
Setbacks? I mean.
Yes.
So it's only the upland in the property?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll talk about a little bit how that calculates into what we call the compliance model. We're going to comment on that when we talk about your districts, but that's all taken into account. Mm-hmm. Just to give you some context of where North Andover sits in specifically our region here in the Merrimack Valley, you can see this is color-coded by what are the different types of communities. And so North Andover, that darker yellow is an adjacent community, so you don't have a stop, but you're next to a community with a stop. The teal, that is a commuter rail community that has a commuter rail stop. And then the lighter beige color there is what they are calling adjacent small towns. Those are communities that do not have a commuter rail stop and have are under a certain population limit and under a certain housing stock limit. Each of those communities have different requirements under the legislation. So for North Andover's purposes, we pay attention to what's required of a commuter rail community. So looking at what that means for us here in North Andover, essentially the town has to produce, like we said, a unit capacity that could allow for up to 1,100 or about 1,200 units of housing, and has to allow for zoning up to 1,500 units per acre. The key here is that this is just a zoning mandate. It is not at all a production mandate. So you don't necessarily have to find a giant swath of open land where you're going to build units tomorrow. This is just zoning. So whether those units happen tomorrow or in 50 years does not matter. You just have to be creating the zoning. So this is comparing North Andover to some of the surrounding towns in the region, so you can get a better idea. You can see North Andover is about in the middle there with about 1,000 units, versus we have some on the really low end of about 100 units, and on the higher end are cities, 4,000 units in some of our gateway cities, and Andover, a relatively comparable community, just higher, about 2,000 units as well.
Ian, does this account for existing units, or is that, I mean, does this count existing units? So is there some net difference? I mean, 1,100 is a lot of units. Is there some net difference there?
So it only takes into account existing units when you're thinking about calculating your capacity you have to zone for. It does not count existing units in the sense that if you zone it over an area that has 50 units, you don't check off the 50 units because it's not a production mandate. So we're not even paying attention to what is currently in the place where you're zoning.
So we're saying this is saying we have a gap of 1,200 units. Is that, am I reading?
It's not a gap, it's just saying that you have to zone for that many units to be possible in that district. It's not identifying a necessary gap in the town. It is identifying how many units have to be feasible to build in the area that you zone.
By being an adjacent community, we're required 10% of our existing housing stock.
It's 10%, yeah.
And so others are required 15, some are required 5%, but being an adjacent community, it's a 10% measure.
So the formula that is used to derive these numbers of how many units you have to zone for in your district, it's based on proximity to an MBTA station, 15%, 10%, we're 10%. But that formula for the requirement, it doesn't, for example, take into account, when you look at all these communities, how many multifamily units already exist, not in the district, but in the communities. There's no sort of credit for if there's a town that has invested in multifamily units and it's above what other communities have done, makes no difference to this formula. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's just looking at your housing stock and mandating a percentage of that current housing stock to be zoned for in that area.
But it doesn't differentiate what a community's housing stock breakdown is between detached, single-family, and multi-unit. I
That's
think you were going to make a
Yeah,
comment?
the comment I was just going to make, I think this was also to this gentleman's point, is, imagine an area that's a district that you're considering zoning for this. If there are already 500 units in that district, then the net that you would have to be producing under that district is the difference. If it all got built out, right? That's what I'm saying. So that would be your.
What it does is, it obviously incentivizes you to put part of the district where there's already housing.
Dense housing.
Because if you put let's say a community has 80% multifamily, and they create a district in another area, it becomes incremental, right? But if they put it in a district where the housing already is.
So for the purposes of complying with the law and thinking about your 1,100 units, we assume in all cases there is not currently any structure on that land. And so when we're thinking about 1,100 units, we're only thinking about the zoning capacity. If you zone it, what is the capacity? It does not matter what is currently on that land area. And so you wouldn't be saying, well, we have 50 units here, we are required 1,100, so now we're down to 1,050. It's just the zoning, and we're assuming for the purposes of modeling, if we can get to that unit capacity, that there's nothing on site. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so in theory, if a zone of the appropriate size already existed in town that was already at that density, you could simply overlay and be compliant.
And there would be no change, correct? Correct.
That was my question. I'm thinking, okay, so you already have all this stock. Well, that's only good if people are willing to sell.
Exactly.
And there's not a lot of historic buildings
Correct.
or whatever.
Correct.
So it's,
The state has been pretty clear in there, and even in writing, in stating that they do not expect that every city and town is going to be maxing out their production based off of the zoning they're requiring. It's just a level
A map.
place to zone, and so just a target to reach. And the state has said pretty clearly that they don't expect every community to now build 15 units an acre and reach that 1,191 units. It's just not practical when you look at a build-out analysis. But when we're just doing it for the purposes of compliance, we're just looking at, in an ideal scenario, if everything was perfect and here's your zoning requirements, can you theoretically get to that 1,100?
But by zoning by right, it takes away a lot of the risk and
Correct.
apprehension of developers who may want to entertain that type of project.
Exactly.
So just a quick question, so the 1,100, is that a dynamic or a static number? So in other words, is that if the 2030 census rolls around, do we have to change, and does that number move as a function of housing stock increases?
That's a great question. As of right now, it is static. The state has not said if they would be looking at refining it after, let's say, the 2030 census. So this is what you have right now. I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. Our impressions are that this is a static number as of right now, and the state's focus, from what we have heard, is getting communities to compliance, and they're not even thinking ahead to what might happen. So I think that's a discussion in the future, but no definitive answer there yet.
So if this is by right, then how does that impact our 40B numbers? So this would reduce our percentage, wouldn't it? If these are by right, so they don't have to apply for a 40B permit to build these multi-family housing, doesn't that then lower our 40B percent?
So the advantage for North Andover is you have inclusionary zoning. And so if you see any by right development over that threshold, 10 units or something in town, then you will be requiring affordable, and you're not going to skew your balance.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer.
But it's not, it doesn't automatically help our numbers, like.
No, it's not a guarantee that you're all of a sudden going to see 100 affordable units and it's going to get you to that
Just have to be
10%. But
market rate.
if you're producing more units, theoretically, and you have that inclusionary zoning in place, you're going to be getting closer to your requirement. Yeah.
And because we're an adjacent community, these zoning districts do not need to be within a certain
Correct.
distance from the, okay.
Yep. And we'll talk about how we approached that when we were talking. And again, these are all preliminary, so we want your feedback when we talk about those districts and why, because you're not required to be next to a commuter rail station, why did we think about the initial districts we were thinking about? And so this outlines specifically what your requirements are as an adjacent community. So this is all kind of what we just touched upon. So your district has to be a minimum of 50 acres here in town. Zoning must allow for a minimum of 15 units per acre. Your multifamily unit capacity, that 1,100, almost 1,200 number we were talking about, is equal to 10% of your existing stock. And then reasonable access to a transit station. So thinking in town about, are there any bus routes that might get you to one of the commuter rail stations, thinking from that perspective.
So to provide a little context on the 15 units per acre, we don't often look at that number in developments, but there's a lot of measures that we do look at to control density. And so 15 units per acre, you can see the Princeton Properties that was approved on Osgood Street is 21 units per acre. Avalon Bay Phase 1, which is the West Mill side of Avalon Bay, was permitted at 18 units per acre. Minco or Sutton Street is kind of an outlier at 42 units per acre, but that's because there was significant amount of relief provided through variance and setback exceptions for that development. And then we pulled out a couple of more of this mid-size housing. And so on Sutton Street today, adjacent to the dance studio is 90 Sutton Street. That is a 30-unit multifamily complex, and that's actually 29 units per acre that sits along the Merrimack. And then most recently permitted is 149 Main Street, the former Santander lot. That has commercial first floor and then 2 floors of 12 units each, totaling 24 units. And that equation comes out to 38 units per acre. So again, just to provide some context on that 15, and when we talk about the modeling, we'll explain how there's other dimensional criteria that can plug and play into that model that will kind of tease this units per acre down to around 15.
Exactly. And the perspective here, thinking about how all of these developments are above the 15 units per acre. And so being able to keep that thought as we move forward about what exactly does that mean for density. And then especially when you think about some of these developments, the conversation we just had, when we talk about like the Sutton Street area, you might have smaller parcels, so it's not going to be wouldn't likely be feasible to build a large development because you'd have to buy up, 20 parcels in a certain district in some cases to put something large in. So that's another
Right.
perspective we think about.
When you're piecemealing it.
But this is a good context for you all to think about. The timeline for implementation, we just wanted to let you know kind of what we're going with here. So the initial draft guidelines from the state came out back in December of 2021. Since then, there's been a series of revisions to those guidelines, and then a couple of other steps in the process. The town submitted an action plan back in December to receive interim compliance, which allowed you to keep applying for certain state grant programs. Your next big deadline is December of 2024, which is when you must achieve compliance by. So for that reason, as we've been talking with the town, the target is to go for passage of a new bylaw at the May 2024 town meeting.
And I'll just add, Andrew Shapiro, Director of Community and Economic Development for the record. I'll just add that really our target in terms of, refining or getting to the point of drafting a bylaw to cover this, implementation of this new regulation would really be like fall of this year when you consider the fact that, one, we need to get feedback from DHCD, the state agency in charge of overseeing this program, get feedback to make sure that we would be in compliance, bringing forward whatever we bring forward, and then going through a public process as we always do, usually starting in late the year prior to town meeting in order to vet whatever warrant articles are going to be going on for town meeting. So we don't actually have a lot of time, which is why we're coming to you in summer right now to get some initial feedback on some of our thoughts.
So the comment here says must adopt the zoning amendment. We can't guarantee that the town will vote for that. So what happens if the town does not approve proposed zoning?
That's a great question. What do we need to comply and why? Next slide, exactly. So the penalties coming for communities that do not comply. So if the town meeting does not pass this zoning amendment, there are a couple explicit grant programs that the state has said upfront you will not be eligible to apply for. And so those are the Housing Choice Community Grants and the MassWorks Infrastructure Grants, as well as access to the local capital projects funds. Part of your housing authority funding comes from local capital projects funds and a few other areas. Andrew and Jean pulled out in there how much funding you've received from those grant programs over the past few years, just for context. Outside of those 3 grant programs, the state has also made clear that there may be other restrictions they'll put on access to grants, where they have this guidance here in bold. Determinations of compliance may also inform funding decisions that impact housing and other local housing policies. So there are a whole swath of grant programs right now that when a local municipality is applying for, they have to check a box that says if they are working towards compliance or in compliance. The town is currently in compliance because you submitted an action plan in December, and have to say that you are there. And so there is that also other threat, so to speak, for lack of a better term, out there, that there are other grant programs you may not be eligible for if you do not pass the zoning at town meeting. And then most recently, the Attorney General released guidance stating that in the Attorney General's opinion of the state, the law is not optional and that communities may make themselves vulnerable to civil litigation if they do not comply with the law. So there are a number of explicit items in the statute and then a couple of other areas of guidance that have come from the state about the actual penalties.
So they would give us less money, so then when we have all this housing and children that need to be educated and put in buildings and police and fire, that doesn't come into play. You're going to lose money.
The hope is that, yeah, if you have more housing, you've passed the legislation and then you have access to the funds. That's the hope.
We don't have it. Don't comply.
That's the carrot and the stick.
No, I know.
Yeah.
No, I know, and I'm being sarcastic, saying, oh, so we'll build more, and if we don't, you won't have enough money for different programs or whatever. I don't know. It's kind of unfortunate that our legislators find it that a need to penalize us financially, when many communities are still just getting by with covering the needs of their community. It's disappointing.
All right, so now we're going to segue to potential district locations. And John, as you referred to before, we talked about acreage, and so we need to comply with 50 acres of land, and that has to be developable land. So they do exclude wetlands, public right-of-ways, private right-of-ways, floodplain, protected open space, things like that all get backed out of that equation. So it has to be 50 acres of developable land. The location, we thought...
One other thing, you say, in 25 if it has to be in one parcel?
Yes, 25 acres has to be contiguous, not one parcel, but
And
contiguous.
so hypothetically speaking, the other 25 could be split up.
No less than 5 acres, though, but yes, it can be split up. So the location, the guidance says it should be proximate to transit access. It should be walkable and pedestrian access, and access to commercial centers. So the guidance does really point to a downtown-type environment, but as we'll talk about other areas in town, we actually have other commercial areas that could be very walkable.
Gene, to John's question, could it be divided up but still have to meet these other criteria?
It does.
So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So next slide. So potential districts that we've talked about more than this, but we've kind of narrowed it down to this based on the criteria that I just discussed. And so we've talked about Sutton Street near Main Street to the 495 interchange, actually a little bit north of Main Street, so starting about 200 Sutton Street, which some might know as Charlie Matz's Bueno Bistro, that large development there that kind of sits back, down toward the 495 interchange. 350 Winthrop Ave, which is the North Andover Mall, also known as Market Basket Plaza, and 1600 Osgood Street, which is Osgood Landing. They still retained approximately 58 acres of land. Amazon obtained 110 acres, so that used to be 168 where the 40R was permitted. They now retain 60 acres of land. And so with appropriate dimensional standards, North Andover will be in compliance choosing any two of these 3 districts. So we've already done some scenario testing in the model, and choosing any two, we could still maintain compliance.
Gene, just one question.
Yep.
So these 3 are the 3 that you've laid out and they're somewhat obvious. But did you consider strongly any that are overlays, as Brian talked about, where basically there's residential, multi-family residential
Sure.
that you would do an overlay?
Sure, we talked about, we could probably get close to 25 acres overlaying the East Mill, West Mill, Sutton Pond condos down to Sutton Street. And those are pretty newly built out. The only variable I would say is the parking garage on the East Mill is still intended to be housing someday. I don't know what their plan is for when they'll bring that forward. But if we were to put it over that, it's fairly built out, fairly recent, redevelopment potential. I'm not sure that is as near as.
No, but that's,
Yeah.
my point is, these are 3 parcels, but there could be a half dozen more.
Yep,
Yeah.
sure. And, you know, we talked about potential redevelopment. What's the probability of maybe Market Basket, some of that structure becoming obsolete in somewhat near future as opposed to Sutton Pond or Avalon Bay, which just got built, so.
So this would assume, like, just hypothetically, 350 Winthrop Ave, is that plaza shuts down and it becomes housing?
Well, we don't know, so the zoning would be in place for them to make an informed decision. Market Basket, you know, has renovated in other communities, and they've done a different model for their supermarket. Where retail's going, I mean, we see Eaglewood Plaza, and the men's and women's clothing store are now moved out. It's shifted much more to commercial, either fitness or restaurants. And so does Market Basket potentially, Kohl's and TJ Maxx, I mean, what's their longevity left? So if they were to break that up into 2 parcels, maybe do a mix of residential and keep a grocery store, we don't know. But what it would do would put the zoning in place for them to make an informed decision.
And I think
There's
the
a
other.
lot of wetlands around
So they
I guess I
actually
don't
have
have
2
to tell you.
parcels. We've only selected the one parcel that is actually the constructed impervious parcel. There are wetlands, you're right, closer to the North Andover end, but that's a separate parcel, and we didn't incorporate that for that reason.
So, yeah, just to the mindset, so this is just for zoning, this is not proposing to tear down the Market Basket Plaza or anything like that, this is just overlay zoning that would say that this is where this could happen.
Yep.
And that would meet the requirements from the state.
And it could meet the 25 acres, the one contiguous that has to be 25, it qualifies for that. And we're going, in a couple slides further, explain kind of also about the transit and the walkability in the commercial area.
But I think the important thing is, these are 3 potentials, but there's probably 5 to 10 more, and we ought to look at all of them and see whether, you know, an overlay is a better approach than this, fresh, where you would get incremental units. So I think, you know, again, I think that's probably something the planning board will need to do over the next month or so, just identify maybe a half dozen more where you could logically
I would
put
think
this.
the High Street area would be one for, which would be
Yeah.
good as well.
No, I mean.
No, I understand,
like
and
Gene-
these are they're reasonable.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, I could think of a few others that,
Jean, you said you have though, right? You've identified more sites.
Sure. Rural Crest, we talked about that initially, but that doesn't have bus routes. And it's not, you can walk to some commercial areas, but it's not the easiest walk, and it's not the closest walk.
It has to meet all of the other
There's a lot of criteria, yeah.
transportation and
Well, maybe we'll see some more specifics on these, and that may spur some additional question on that.
And then the last thing I'll mention to keep in mind too is that this is all thinking about an overlay district for zoning. So we're not going to replace the underlying zoning. So everything that's there right now will still be allowed by right. So Market Basket, for example, maybe they do renovate their plaza, but they don't have to put in housing. They'll still have the current zoning that they have in place. So we're purely looking at overlaying just to allow, in addition to what's already there, allowing housing.
I think that's a great decision, at least allowing them to keep what they have.
Okay, so we mentioned this model. The state provided a model in Excel format that we can use to test dimensional criteria for the potential districts. So it's really plug and play. We can decide on minimum lot areas, and that lot area may be different for the Market Basket Plaza as opposed to Sutton Street or opposed to Osgood Landing. So any one of these can have different measures. So the typical ones we have in our zoning today is minimum lot size, maximum units per lot, building height, floor area ratio, lot coverage, setbacks, parking ratios. Things like that will run scenarios to try to, target the numbers that we have to get to. And that's, as you know, 1,191 unit capacity and 15 units per acre. And so Andrew will kind of describe in a little bit more detail these areas that we talked about.
Sure, thanks, Jean. So here you're looking at the 46-acre Sutton Street District, as it were, which, if anybody was following along earlier this year, we did look at starting to examine rezoning downtown. And one of the areas that we looked at was expanding the downtown rezoning effort to around Sutton Street. There are a lot of sort of parcels that are underdeveloped, that are proximate to the river. One of the efforts that we have in our master plan that we outline is trying to open up more access to the Merrimack River. In order to do that, you kind of need to see redevelopment most likely. And so this is the area that we're looking at for Sutton Street. What I would caution everybody in looking at this when they're thinking about it is, number one, doesn't by no means have to be the final outline of a district, but it is 46 acres, so it's a good chunk of area that gets us up to that, close to that 50-acre minimum that we'll need for a total amount of acreage in town to designate to be compliant for MBTA zoning. And a lot of these parcels are large parcels. So like, for instance, the parcel that you see kind of in the lower right-hand corner, it encapsulates all of, Sutton Pond. You've got Clean Harbors in there. You've got the dialysis center property. You've got the Richdale. So a lot of these parcels comprise a lot of property. So the district kind of ends up looking larger than it really is. And a lot of the property is not going to be buildable. For instance, all of that pond area is obviously not buildable property. There's public right-of-ways in there. There's railroad access. That's not going to count towards our acreage. So in reality, the total amount of buildable area is probably smaller than what this map really is showing and representing. And the other thing I'd really quickly point out is all of the smaller parcels along Ashland Street. Obviously, if someone wanted to do anything significant over there, they'd have to do a lot of parcel assemblage, and that would be, in my opinion, pretty difficult to do, or it would have to be done over a long period of time. So just something to keep in mind, but this is one area that we looked at given some factors. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, Ian.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
And I don't know if you know the answer, or maybe John, you know the answer. How buildable are those lots along the river because of the soils? And I would imagine that it's pretty difficult to build there.
You have the normal wetlands
Yeah.
things. You have, probably additional Conservation Commission restrictions because it's a river right. So you get all these riparian rights. So it's not clear to me how close to the river you would be able to go, and what restrictions would be there, because you would get into all sorts of state issues that are beyond what we know.
I was just thinking bad soils too, like requiring piles and
Maybe, yeah.
stuff like that.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is the model that Jean was referencing, that Excel-based spreadsheet. So essentially we input all the parcels here into that model and add the zoning to it. And in that parcel data includes all of the restrictions, the environmental protections that would not allow you to build on certain sites. So they look at wetlands, floodplain, et cetera, and it takes out that portion of the parcel when modeling the ability to build. And then you would still, of course, if there is development proposed, you still have all of your conservation restrictions in place as a town. Someone can't flout those restrictions simply because of this zoning.
Can I ask what's the rationale for excluding the 2 parcels on Sutton Street from the district and not making it just one big contiguous district? The two, but between DeVita and right in front of Clean Harbors, just north of Clean Harbors on the plan.
Oh, where, like,
If someone was actually going to look at a redevelopment and you get,
good catch, I don't think we intended to.
Yeah, no,
They
that's,
should be incorporated, although they look like residential dwellings, they're really doctor offices. I
Right.
think in both of them.
Right.
So, apologies.
No, no.
That line should have been on the other side.
Okay.
And again, just for further orientation, so the very lower right-hand corner, that's Sutton Pond condominiums. So when we talked about, can it be an overlay over existing housing, it certainly could. That spine could continue straight to the West Mill and East Mill.
yeah.
okay, so just to cover some of the aspects of Sutton Street, what make it a district that's, worth consideration for this purpose. Obviously you have good access to 495 and the Lawrence Commuter Rail Station. It is walkable to downtown and commercial areas as well as the Mill District. It has close proximity to Amiva bus route and hopefully a future additional bus route. We're working on that. There's an opportunity to create a more inviting gateway into town. So obviously if we see some redevelopment in this area, one of the things that gets talked about in the master plan is redeveloping our gateway areas, making the area a little more inviting when you come into town. That could potentially be achieved through redevelopment. There is some synergy here with the planned shared use path branching off of Main Street. So obviously, again, another area where we're trying to improve pedestrian connectivity, bicycle connections as well. So that future project, if it could dovetail with any redevelopment that happens in this area, that would be synergistic. And then, as I mentioned before, it does align with master plan strategies. In particular, there's a land use strategy, strategy number 3, focused development and zoning changes in key commercial corridors. I would say that, Main Street of the downtown would be a key commercial corridor, certainly Sutton Street to a lesser degree maybe. And then an economic development strategy number 29, working with larger landowners of economically important properties in town to identify and attract a mix of uses for redevelopment of those properties. And, certainly at least the property on Sutton Street owned by Charlie Matzis, that is a larger parcel of some significance that could be redeveloped in any number of ways. So, we want to be cognizant of that as we consider these districts. So I don't know if anybody has any additional questions about Sutton Street before I move on. Okay, so Market Basket. We talked about this a little bit. As you can see, here's the location of it. Again, it comprises 2 parcels. Selectwoman Smedili did point out there are wetlands further to the south, so we are excluding that area. We know that would be unbuildable. And as you can see, the property is kind of set back a bit from the roadway. You've got a lot of parking. You've got a lot of impervious surfaces right there. Kind of an inefficient land use, if you ask me. And honestly, even if you redeveloped this, or rezoned it for more housing, it doesn't mean there has to be housing there. The owner of the property, I believe it is owned by Market Basket. They may have no intention to do that. They may want to keep it a commercial plaza. I know many other Market Basket plazas throughout our, the North Shore and in eastern Massachusetts that have remained retail plazas, and they probably will for some time to come. So it's not to say anything would happen as a result of zoning, but it could provide another tool in the basket for this property owner. If you don't mind flipping to the next slide. Thank you, Ian. So again, 32 acres along Route 114. Again, better access or good access to Route 495, close proximity to commercial businesses along Route 114 in both North Andover and Lawrence. It is served by a MIVA bus route. It connects Lawrence, North Andover, and Andover. It's another gateway improvement opportunity, and again, it aligns with those master plan strategies that I pointed out before. Anybody have any questions about Market Basket before we move on to the next one?
Andrew, just a quick question.
Sure.
Does the 114 redeveloped at MassDOT soon, does it extend all the way down?
It doesn't, so the current project does not. It extends to Waverly Road, thank you, Gene. There is a future iteration, there's another additional project for redevelopment of Route 114 that's a separate TIP project, and I'm not really sure where it is on the schedule, but obviously they're eager to get this one out of the way since it's been going on for so long and it's costing a lot of money. But I believe that is a future project to extend that further.
And if they were to take this and redevelop it, it would probably trigger, it would obviously trigger
Absolutely.
traffic and
Yep.
mitigation and all that.
Yep.
And going back to that thought about placement and that gateway aspect of it too, thinking about traffic, both the Sutton Street District and this one being right next to 495, you don't have folks that are going to have to drive all the way through town to get to a major interstate. So we're trying to minimize the impact of traffic around town too and locating some of these districts.
That's a good point. Okay, next slide, please. And Osgood Landing, I think everyone's pretty familiar with this site. We have 58 acres to consider here. Another area that's located sort of on a outer lying edge of town, if you will. Ian, if you don't mind going to the description slide, thank you. So 58 acres on Route 125. When you think about it, it was originally envisioned as an area that could accommodate new housing because it was approved as a 40R district. So a decent portion of that property is already zoned for new multifamily housing by right. Actually, I think at a higher density than 15 units per acre, if I'm not mistaken, already. It's close to Route 495 via the Ward Hill Connector. You're close to commercial businesses and employers along Route 125. I think that's one piece that we haven't really mentioned enough about it. Proximity to employers. Obviously, you've got at least 1,500 new workers coming to work from Amazon. I'd like to think a lot of people who are going to be working there already live in North Andover, but let's face it, a lot of people will be coming from Lawrence, Methuen, Haverhill, and other communities, and that's commuter traffic. We have an opportunity to help accommodate growing business segments and enable people who live in town to also be employed here. So that's an opportunity. It's obviously also another gateway improvement opportunity, being that we're next to Haverhill in this location. There is potential for an expanded MEVA bus route and MBTA commuter rail access. So the MBTA commuter rail access, that people may have heard of this floating around, we did get some funding from the state to do a feasibility study for an MBTA commuter rail stop. And obviously you have rail access at the rear of this site. So it's a natural place to look for that. And certainly if you were going to zone it in this manner, in addition to having Amazon there, I would think the state would have some interest in trying to provide additional transit options and access. So that's an opportunity. No promises, and obviously that takes a lot of effort and money and time, but it's just something to consider. And then, of course, this aligns with master plan strategies, in addition to one in particular relative to Osgood Landing, the land use strategy number one, review the OSGOD, which is the existing zoning overlay for the 40R district in this area, and update zoning bylaw to ensure district types of uses that are attractive. So basically, encourage reinvestment in that particular area. Granted, a great deal of it is being redeveloped as we speak, so, but we do have a fair bit of it in front, both the solar parcel and the commercial building itself that could stand to be redeveloped in the future. So, in terms of next steps, so what we're trying to do in this process is confirm where we want to target. We want to go out to the wider community, and we wanted to come before you all first before doing that, which is why we're here tonight. But we really want to home in on where we want to be doing this, based on feedback from you all, based on wider community feedback, what makes sense to the most people. Then once we kind of know where we're going with it, as far as the actual locations, we have to develop a dimensional standard. So I believe Gene talked about the model slide, the model that we have. So you can basically put in certain dimensional standards to say, okay, we're going to, if Osgood Landing, for instance, is one of the areas we're looking at, if it's 50-some acres, and we're going to, or 40-something acres, and we're going to, model for 15 units per acre there, what does that look like? And what do we need to be able to achieve that? Once we do that, we need to basically draft a zoning bylaw around those dimensional standards. We need to confirm with the state agency in charge of this program that we're developing a compliant district. And then once we know, we have the zoning in hand, we've got the locations in hand, we've got the confirmation from the state in hand that we're compliant, we can then have it go before the public once again through a public hearing process, as we always do ahead of town meetings. The various boards that look at these and make recommendations in preparation for annual town meeting 2024. And as was noted earlier, we do need to be in compliance by the end of calendar year 2024. If we don't become compliant, we're going to be in jeopardy of the penalties that were outlined. One thing I will expand upon from what Selectman Valencourt had said, you know, one option we would have if we struck out a town meeting is we'd have to obviously consider, you know, put all options on the table. Do we want to have a special town meeting? Do we want to, I mean, I'm not here to represent the town to say that that's a good decision or not. I'm just saying it would be, I think, in the town's best interest to comply. So we have to figure out a way to do that, whether it's on the first take at annual town meeting 2024 or later.
Can I ask this question? I spoke to a little bit about what I was commenting on before. So if we don't comply, it could potentially make us ineligible for other grants that have nothing to
Correct.
do with this project.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's a little bit overwhelming to think either you do what we tell you, or we're not going to give you any more money, and you're going to, good luck with you with taking care of your own needs. That I feel as though that this town has done a pretty good job of holding our own. So I did have it correct. So it's not that you'll get more if you do it, which you will, but if you don't do it, you're going to lose opportunities.
Correct.
That's how they drive you compliance. No.
And just to further contextualize this just a little more, so MassWorks, in my view, is kind of the biggie on this one. An earlier slide noted that we got about a total of $5 million, and that's over a fairly short period of time for some significant projects that allowed us to build out the sewer extension along Route 125. It also allowed us to build pedestrian infrastructure and resurface Route 125 in certain areas. And we're currently applying to redo the intersection of Osgood Street and Great Pond Road per the work that we had done to examine the roadway there. We did a road safety audit and some further analysis. And so we're applying for a little over $2 million in funding this cycle. Those types of projects we'll be ineligible for in the future if we're not compliant. At least that's what the state is telling us. And I envision other projects, just thinking ahead, things like the shared use path downtown, things like portions of the capital project that we'll need to implement the downtown streetscape improvements once we get that engineered and designed. Those are the types of things I envision going back to the state to request funding for, whether it's through the MassWorks funding or through another avenue that they might have. And my sense is, given everything we've been told by the state through this program, is that if we don't comply, those are the types of things we will not be eligible to receive. So we'll have to find other ways to fund those projects.
But again, has the state offered up an actuarial process to see, with this, do we ever come ahead, even with the money or for programs they say that we could be eligible for, or that we might lose if we don't?
When you say come ahead, are you referring to housing production or monetarily in terms
I'm
of
talking
funding?
about taking care of the needs of the community and the town that we're in.
Yeah, I think, Rosemary, if we are careful and mindful about how we pick the districts, that's the most critical piece. I'm not as worried about the dimensional requirements because I know Gene will do a fantastic job on that. I think if you do it carefully, you can end up with something that you can sell to the town at a town meeting, and that'll alleviate some of the concerns that have existed all along and still exist in people's minds today about, are we losing the balance of building? I think we can come up with a fair approach that balances those things pretty well, but I believe it's all in how you pick the districts and how much of it is based on an overlay for things that are already there, as opposed to, where you can build completely new on top of what we already have.
Well, I think Andrew kind of touched on it as well. We were mentioning, Osgood Landing. It's already zoned for that level of density, so what are we really changing in that instance?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be curious, I'm sure there's a lot more to study, and it's not as simple as I'm making it sound, but.
Well, I'd add really quickly on the density issue, when you looked at that slide that covered some of the existing projects or permitted projects that the planning board has already permitted, or that even have gone to town meeting for, relief, we've built projects that are far denser than 15 units per acre. If anything, 15 units per acre is almost economically infeasible.
It could be a
Okay,
triple decker
by
on
right.
8,000 square feet of land, right? And
That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. So basically, there's an avenue, for instance, where you could theoretically say, okay, in this district, we're going to say 15 units per acre is by right. Anything above that is by special permit. So you're really not changing much at that point. Because really the issue right now is we don't have any by right, other than the 40R district, I don't think we have any by right larger scale multifamily. It would all go through a special permit process, which is why we're not currently in compliance. But you don't have to go much further. All you really have to say is get it to a level where you can bring it to around 15 units per acre by right. Anything above that would be a special permit process to increase your density.
I don't disagree that, especially with what John said, if you choose wisely,
Yeah.
that you can perhaps put the puzzle together and still be eligible for money or not to be excluded for a totally unrelated project. That's the part that kind of, it doesn't sit well with me. It's kind of like a little bit of dirty pool or someone with a big stick. But we should all be a little bit used to that these days. None of the rules are always fair. But I think, John, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what Brian's saying. If we put the puzzle together correctly, we could still be eligible and not lose grants that have nothing to do with the project. But I'd just like to see an analysis as to how, well, I guess we would go through that as we try to put the whole puzzle together. If we do this, this, and this.
I mean, if we're in compliance, then we will not lose the opportunity to apply for those grants.
Or maintain those other grants that have nothing to do with this project.
And the key is just being in compliance with the rules that they're setting forth.
Have you kind of, I know it's very premature, have you kind of started to put that puzzle together?
Yes.
I can see you have, because you're nodding.
We all have, the three of us have. Poor Andrew and Gina have been on the phone with us like every other week, talking about this and talking about it, so
It's
certainly.
not, so what you're all saying is, it's not an unobtainable goal. It is attainable
That is correct.
if we do it right.
I think the stress, that if we do comply, it's not like building permits for 1,200 units are getting pulled tomorrow, at all. It's just.
Exactly.
Maybe not ever.
Maybe not ever.
Right,
You
like
zone
on Sutton
market-
Street,
you
you
zone
have
market
to have
basket.
multiple
They're not closing that
businesses have
store
to be
anytime
willing
soon.
to sell their business
No.
to build multifamilies, right? And is that gonna happen? I don't know, I doubt it, but.
No.
And if it
could.
were to happen, that's a great place to have, like, if you want a robust downtown with booming businesses, that's.
Right, but it's not like.
No doubt,
the
by
town
right
is
zoning
taking-
will spur some activity. It
Some.
will spur some private development, saying, okay, now we take some of that regulatory risk out. So they will look at assemblages, they will look at opportunities to put together bigger projects, which I think is what the state is trying to do here. And, I think, this compliance, I think they're giving us a lengthy amount of time and a lot of flexibility and options to do it. If we don't comply, my fear is you're gonna see an even bigger stick from the state down the road.
I think
That'd
that
be-
is probably true. This is just the
That's-
tip of the iceberg.
That is kind of my fear.
Yeah, it could be worse, is I think what I'm afraid of.
But the sticks, the sticks are what concern me, because we're a town that has to pass at town meeting. So I heard you say possible civil litigations. Well, how do you sue a town because the town population didn't want this? It's not like, we all made a decision, it's the town. And that's a big body of, a legislative body that is making that decision. And to hold everybody responsible because the town doesn't approve the zoning, it seems like that's what doesn't sit well with me.
Can I ask a question? Where does the Rockport lawsuit stand? Does anyone know?
I don't know where that lawsuit, there's now lawsuits on both sides of trying to force communities to comply from outside entities, not from the state, and from individual communities. The state is confident that that the legislature has authority to enact zoning laws, and so there's no doubt from the state perspective, the administration's perspective, that this is legal and that there's no standing in court for this, but we'll see.
You know, this is partly to the whole 40B plan as well, that communities such as North Andover, which we have a pretty big land mass, that we just keep getting hit with development, whereas other communities where they're all built out, like Swampscott, like Marblehead, I mean, I can go on and on and on. There's something very unfair about all of that. And it's a struggle, especially when people are, you know, we're feeling crowding in schools, that we need more police, more fire, we need more other things in town.
And so one of the things we're happy to do at future sessions, and some of the engagement we'll do with the public, is to talk about some of those concerns as well. So we look pretty in depth at both on a region level and individual communities about the impacts of multifamily housing on public services, schools, emergency services, DPW, all those factors. And so more than happy to break that down on a town by town level and talk about, you know, what is the impact and what does that mean and what does that look like. We study that pretty consistently and every year look at it, so we're happy to have those conversations and break that down as well.
That sounds great. That's,
And one
I
more-
think I would be very interested in seeing all of that.
Yeah.
Along with working with our planning board and others, so.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
One more point of clarification. I know we've used the term by right several times tonight, but for the public's benefit, that doesn't mean there's no oversight. So there would still be a site plan review process. It just won't necessarily be by special permit unless it triggers some type of zoning that says you can get this by special permit. But by right simply means there'll be a plan review before the planning board. The discretionary piece kind of gets removed with the special permit, but it's still a full plan review.
Okay, so in theory, if I'm understanding it correctly, if we craft it appropriately, all those projects that we put together would go through the exact same process they've already gone through. Is that
Right.
right?
Yep.
And then
that-
the last,
I'm sorry, and that's how the 40R is really structured. That's by right, but it was still a whole process with application procedure and review by the planning board.
the one thing I was going to mention too is when we were talking about how you can become compliant with, if we chose 2 of those 3 districts we discussed, we found ways to model reaching compliance. When we think about looking at 2 districts, our intention there, again, going back to piecing that puzzle together, when we talk about the minimum 15 units an acre requirement, that is an average across all of your sub-districts. So you could theoretically have, let's say, Market Basket at 20 units an acre and Sutton Street at 10 units an acre, and you average out to 15 units an acre. So our intention there, too, with looking at multiple districts, was to try and spread out that density a bit more. So you, like, on the Sutton Street, we had it 46 acres. You might think, why not just tack on 4 more acres and reach it with that one spot? Our thought process was maybe you could spread that out a bit by splitting it up.
Because
That's
the
a
whole
great
district would
idea.
have to be consistent otherwise, is that?
Correct.
Couldn't do some.
Sharing the burden,
Yeah.
sharing the burden in different areas of town.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
So-
a really good idea, and you said it well.
Before we close out the conversation, I wanted to know if we could get a little more, if people are willing to share, some, just, you know, feedback on the district themselves. I know we've heard some talk about the state legislation, you know, the issue about penalties for noncompliance and things like that. But assuming we're working within a world that we're going to move forward with some iteration of this, do these 3 districts, to the folks in this room, seem reasonable? And are there 2 out of 3 that perhaps rise to the level above? Yeah.
My hope
Yeah.
is we gotta look more broadly than this. 3 is not nearly enough. We gotta look at 6, 8, or 10. And I don't think it's good to force us down the path of picking
Okay.
those 3. That's my personal opinion.
Okay. Do others share that opinion?
They all have their pros and cons, right? Osgood Street, to me, seems like the best alternative because it can be done in one spot, but also, you know, right, but also to permit housing right next to that new huge Amazon facility. I mean, who wants to look at that every day in their backyard? So that's something, you know, but to me, it would be the most logical spot because it has the most. Sutton Street seems probably like one of the biggest stretches because there's so many different parcels that would have to be pulled together, and you'd have to, well, again, it's all about zoning, right?
Yeah, it's
But,
not-
yeah, I keep, trying to separate the 2, development and zoning. It's all about zoning. But there again, there's a lot of different parcels there. Winthrop Ave, maybe that's another good option because it's a contiguous piece of property, and there again, it's mostly a single owner that may have to make a decision. But I think John's right. I mean, I think there's other pieces of property. I mean, what about the property that Merrimack owns behind the office buildings there?
Well, I think,
maybe.
Oh, yes.
I'm just throwing out things, you
Where the
know.
hangar used to be.
but I think, don't we get further limited because of some of the other requirements, like you talk about like transit,
Because of
walkable,
public
commercial?
transit,
It does
accessible.
tighten those other options. I'm not saying it's only 3, but it does tighten those options up.
Well, and
Instead of-
also, you know, we want to, I think it's, you know, we can do this any number of ways, and obviously, one of the main things we're constrained by is just staying above 5 acres for any one district, but the more sites you look at, the more you have to technically cobble together. There's not many large landmass areas that people are going to be willing to say, in 1 or 2 foul swoops, we can cover most of our 50-acre compliance standard. Other areas would be smaller acreage sites when you take into consideration the actual acreage of the parcel itself and then taking out any potential wetlands and other non-buildable areas within it. So it just creates new challenges, but, you know, we have to, if we have to explore more opportunities, we have to do that. And we're just constrained by time, just as you all know. We're looking to get something, you know, considered by the end of the year so we can proceed on that. And, you know, we're in the middle of summer, which when you consider vacations and after, you know, things move fast from here to the end of the year, let's just put it that way.
One of the parcels has to be at least 25
Correct.
acres, that's.
One of the districts, so the
Sorry,
parcel
yes,
does not,
yes,
correct,
yes.
okay.
And just to go back, you guys have gone through the various scenarios. These are what you think are the top 3.
I mean, we've had internal discussions about it, and these are the 3 that kind of rose to the top.
We have not.
I agree. But they've done their job, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
They've
fair enough,
they've gone
yes.
through the process. It's not like they just willy-nilly picked.
Yeah.
They have looked at all of North Andover and said, we think these are the top 3.
So,
And I would say, just 1 second.
sure.
I guess my opinion would be Osgood is a good location. I like the idea of another commuter rail spot. I think that would be attractive. When I first looked at the list, I was like, Market Basket, I didn't really like it, but being close to 495 and getting that 114 corridor fixed would be great. Main Street might.
Not to say that there aren't more options, but I do like the proximity to the highway for all of these.
Yeah, and you get people on it
Possibilities.
in and out quickly.
Mhm.
That's it.
Doesn't a commuter rail stop at Osgood going to change our designation to a MBTA community?
Not,
It's not enough time.
okay, so I'll just trash that, that analysis. We won't do it. No, I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know. I mean, and it's cart before horse. I mean,
Not in my lifetime.
even if, you know, the state wanted to move forward on that, it would take some time to ever implement something like that, in my
Can't
view.
permit a water line in less than 80 weeks. Imagine if you stop.
That's gonna be somebody else's.
I mean, I think based on everything we've seen I'm sorry, Peter, you wanted to say something, right? I don't want to cut you off. You go ahead. Based on what we've seen tonight, I'm comfortable, you know, at least sharing, you know, my opinion that I would say the Sutton Street District and the Osgood Street District were the 2 that I'd be most comfortable with for a couple of reasons. You know, the Osgood Street District, if it is truly already zoned for that much density, I think it makes it a much easier sell to the town that you're not heaping on a whole lot more units than can already be built today. And I think the Sutton Street district, just in its proximity to downtown, is critical for an ultimate, you know, downtown revitalization. I think if we're actually serious about, you know, trying to comply and absolutely adding housing over this, the Market Basket Plaza, that's going to be a grocery store for the rest of my life. It's never going to change. So I think if we're actually serious about actually trying to add some housing, those are the 2 districts that I would be most supportive of.
So I guess I was looking at this more as, these are 3 that give us a starting point for a discussion, rather than these are the top 3 that we need to choose from. And I'm really struck, we've had a really rich discussion on these 3. We don't know how much of a rich discussion we have not yet gotten to, because we don't yet know, we have not yet articulated what our options 4 through 8. And I do think we should reserve the opportunity. There may be an option 5 or 7 here that was, wow, really glad we had an opportunity to think about that. So that's where I'm at right now. This is a great starting point. It's wonderful to hear the advantages among these 3, and I'm hoping we will have an opportunity to take a look at the advantages on the rest of the list that we haven't gotten to yet.
just so I'm clear, I think this question was, you can't zone restricted land, right? That comes out. So you can't just artificially bump up your acreage.
We'll take the airport.
I was wondering.
Can I ask, what's your next step here, right? So you're trying to get something from us, some kind of feedback, so that you can go to then look a little deeper, possibly add some additional sites? Like, what kind of feedback are you looking for from us to be able to take that next step?
So I guess I would say what are 4 through 8. I mean, I can provide the planning board with the map of the town, and you guys can circle red areas, and we can try to break those down somewhat. But I mean, it's not going to go out at the corner of Sharpness Pond Road, I wouldn't think, and it's not going to go out around the lake, and it's not going to go out country. So there's only a finite area that we certainly considered, and like I said, we considered Rural Crest, we considered some other areas. That's where we landed, but if you guys want to red mark a map, then we can start to fine tune that and run that through a map.
I was being fresh, but what about the airport, a shared project with the city of Lawrence in the town of North Andover?
So you can't do publicly owned land unless there's an active RFP for it to be redeveloped. So
We
publicly owned
had
land does
one
not
years
count.
ago, and then people changed their mind. So we were hoping to turn it into an industrial park, so forth and so on. But,
So they don't consider that developable land in this conversation.
okay,
So that
I
that
just
would be
thought
excluded.
could be a benefit to both communities. But those are the things I think that Peter and John and others in the room were saying. We just go all in, wide open.
And we would love to hear your thoughts, like Jean was saying, on what are those 4, 5, 6, whatever options, and thinking about it, forgive me, I'm going to take the optimist perspective of it, but thinking about it as that opportunity of where do you want to create those vibrant districts in your town? If you're thinking about housing and commercial, where do you want those two to combine to be bringing activity to town if you want that? So thinking about, like, I think it was mentioned earlier, downtown, trying to do some downtown revitalization with the Sutton Street district. Once you add housing, you have more consumers down there for businesses, and thinking about districts in your other areas of town. Are there areas where you want to see some of that vibrancy, and figuring out where that fits? It would be great to hear from you all at a future time about what you think that is and where those districts make sense.
Does anyone recall what the per unit or per acre density of Royal Crest was going to be?
I believe 17.
17?
Yeah, but remember, there was a lot of commercial there too.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know.
Right, but the ultimate residential units were then compliant.
If you look at just the building, it would have been much higher than that, like just a residential building, it would have been much higher than that 17, but across that entire land area.
76 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, just curious.
This is just a random question, kind of. Is there something that you guys account for the decline in housing production over the last 30 years?
I'm sorry, how do we count it?
Like, what's the reason for it? Why did it happen?
So, such a lack of production due to restrictive zoning, essentially. And so that's why the state is saying we are short housing, there's not enough housing, and that is because we have so much restrictive zoning. This is an effort to loosen the zoning restrictions. And
I mean, I think that's true to some degree, but I think there's a lot of other factors.
there are certainly many other
that,
factors, correct.
On top of it, it's, the fact that a lot of places are running out of land, and there's not a lot of land to be built. I mean, the deep dark secret in North Andover over the last 10 years, there's 37 single-family houses built in the last 8 years, over 600 apartment units. So again, we think we're a single-family residential town, but it's not quite that simple. And North Andover's probably built more multifamily than just about any other town in the Merrimack Valley over the last 10 years.
Well, and the other snapshot on that topic is that today, North Andover has 55% of all residences are single-family. Only 55%. And according to MAPC, single families represent 79% in most maturing suburb-type municipalities. What that says to me is that North Andover has done, and it's reflected in John's statistics, North Andover has already done a lot consistently over decades with multifamily developments of different sizes and sorts. And that's why I raised at the very beginning, the algorithm that's being used here is proximity to MBTA and total number of residences. That's great, but what about communities that have been ahead of their time in addressing multifamily units, and that's not included in this algorithm? So, I mean, that's probably not a productive discussion, because that means, I think, going to court with the state and arguing over their use of the algorithm. But that's also why I really think, I understand time is short. I huge respect for what the professionals have done to bring before us with these three, but I do hope we'll have an opportunity to talk about ways to think about this that maybe could be helpful to the community beyond these three. Because I do think North Andover, really, to John's point, stands apart with our current mix of housing. Only 55% right now are single family, and I only sought out these numbers recently, and it was a bit of a surprise.
Where'd you get those numbers? That
Assessor's office.
Okay, that surprised me.
Now, let me make an important qualification. Single-family houses not including condos. So if condos were...
Detached single-family.
Correct, detached single-family, 55%, which I thought was a sort of reasonable way to just have that sort of generalized stat.
Right. Again, I would say we've also protected hundreds and hundreds of acres permanently as well, right? So
Yes.
I think they do come in a bit of that balance. I think we've been leaders in both fronts in trying to have that balance. So, you know, I don't think there's any choice but to comply, for one. I mean, if you want to see what the bigger stick is, look at Minnesota, where they banned single-family housing from zoning, single-family only zoning. So that's where this is headed, I think, nationally, in a lot of places.
And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't do our part, helping to address this housing crisis. I just would add, we have been.
Yeah, exactly.
We do support helping with the housing crisis, and we've supported it with more than talk.
Thanks, everyone, for your time this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for
And
having
thank you to
us.
MVPC for all the work they've done in the project. Yes, thank you for waiting. And yes, we'll absolutely there'll be more on this topic in the months to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, you've done a great job with what
We
you're
had
doing.
nice and hard agenda.
We still have stuff on our agenda. You
We're
guys
gonna
can
have a
close.
motion to adjourn.
Yes, you guys can adjourn your meeting.
So moved.
Can I go with the planning board?
We're not done.
Thank you all.
Well
Good
done,
night,
John.
everybody.
Sorry for the long wait, guys.
Yes, thank you for your patience.
I'm going to ask how long our meeting
We're still going. Don't get up yet.
I know,
is.
it's-
10 o'clock.
I really like this young man. I think he's great.
Peter, when we grab his name.
Peter, your wife won't know your name. No. Can't even-
I can stand sticking
I
through.
know, Stan's
Dan is just.
Nowhere better to be.
Dan loves to visit us.
You know we get public comment already, right?
So if I'm gonna do anything, Janice makes me stay till the bitter end, right? So there's at least one public person in the line.
That's right.
19.
Thank you.
Okay, if I have not lost track, we are now at consent items? Is
Yeah.
that-
This is when it's great, they're one fell swoop.
Yes, all right. We are looking to approve consent items. Item A is to accept a donation from Lowell 5 Bank in the amount of $2,500 for fireworks. Item B, to accept a donation from the Library Board of Trustees in the amount of $5,000 for library materials. Item C, to accept a donation from the Library Board of Trustees in the amount of $12,475.12 for furniture. And item D, to accept a donation from the Friends of the Stevens Memorial Library in the amount of $2,403.25 for summer programs. Friends of Stevens Memorial.
Chair Phillips, I just wanted to make a correction. The last item is actually from the Friends of Stephen
Yep,
Memorial Library.
it was correct, so, thank you.
It's
Thank
an
you.
SML.
Madam Chair, I'll move we approve the consent items as listed and also follow that up with a thank you note to each of the donors.
I have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any other discussion? Just a big, huge thank you to all of the donors, right? And
So it's quite a list.
it is.
A lot of money.
Variety of, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the open session minutes of June 12th and July 11th?
I'm doing so now.
And if you see any changes, let me know.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the open session minutes from June 12th and July 11th, 2023.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to our next meeting on August 7th, 2023 at 5:00 PM. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Stand.